If you've returned, then I assume you found something worthwhile? Natalia's voice carried a soft yet commanding tone as she addressed the witch June. June chuckled, clearly pleased with herself. Yes, she replied with a sing-song lilt. Did you hire her? Ruby asked, turning to Natalia. Natalia nodded in confirmation. Sasha furrowed her brows in thought. Oh, I vaguely remember hearing about that, but I was quite busy at the time. June rolled her eyes, her internal monologue brimming with sarcasm. Busy? Oh, of course. You were probably too occupied sucking your husband's blood to notice anything else. June refocused and addressed Ruby with curiosity. Lady Ruby, what brings you here? Ruby's crimson gaze turned frosty. Can I not visit my darling's home? June's expression froze. Wait. What did you just say? I think I misheard you. She even wiped her ear for effect. Ruby raised an eyebrow. What? Is it so shocking that I'm in a relationship? Sasha sighed. I don't think that's what she's surprised about, Ruby. Huh. Ruby glanced at her friend, confusion evident. June's eyes darted between Ruby and Sasha, a glint of realization dawning. Her thoughts swirled with excitement. As I suspected, that man has enormous potential. Her pupils seemed to sparkle, dollar signs almost visible in her gaze. Natalia interrupted before June's greed could run wild. June, focus. What did you find? June snapped out of her reverie. All right, give me a moment. With a wave of her hand, a large magic circle materialized in the center of the room, glowing with intricate runes. The circle expanded, projecting a shimmering image of two figures, Lucy and Karen. June pointed at the image of Lucy. This is Lucy, a noble vampire wanted by the Inquisition. Personality traits: liar, cautious, cunning, proud, and hardworking. She's in a relationship with her so-called subordinate, Karen. However, Karen's true role is that of a noble talent scout. The image shifted, zooming in on Karen. Ruby's eyes narrowed with interest. Which clan does Karen serve? The Horseman clan, June answered. Ruby frowned. The who? I've never heard of them. Same here, Sasha added. June looked utterly appalled. Have you two been living under a rock? Sasha shrugged. Well, we've had other priorities lately. Ruby nodded. Yes, a lot has happened in a short time. June sighed dramatically. Consider this free information. The Horseman clan is the family that usurped the vampire count title from Lady Sasha's lineage. Sasha's eyes widened in shock. What? Ruby's expression turned icy. She fixed her gaze on June. How do you know something that was supposed to be confidential? June smirked. Confidentiality doesn't exist among witches. In our world, anything can be bought for the right price. She leaned in slightly. I paid handsomely to the witch the Horseman clan hired. She sold me everything. Natalia's gentle smile didn't falter, though an air of quiet menace surrounded her. June, did you sell any information about my darling? June's bravado crumbled instantly under Ruby's blood-red glare. And no, of course not. I'm not suicidal. Ruby scrutinized her, searching for any hint of deception. Finding none, she relented, the temperature in the room slowly returning to normal. Sasha crossed her arms. You also know about Scat Hack taking my husband, don't you? June nodded hesitantly. Yes, my informant saw a Countess Scat Hack carrying a man, like a sack of potatoes, into her estate. Based on the description, it was Victor. But after that, I lost contact with him. Ruby's voice was calm, though it carried an edge. Don't bother looking for him. He's probably 6 feet under by now. June gulped and nodded in agreement. Scat Hack's reputation precedes her. Another informant bites the dust sigh. Natalia broke the tension with a gentle compliment. June, you're a talented witch. Few could gather what you did. June smiled proudly. Why, thank you. Ruby and Sasha exchanged knowing glances, both rolling their eyes at the witch's smugness. Natalia turned back to June. So, what did you uncover about Lucy? June gestured again, and the image shifted to reveal a massive white coffin adorned with a black crucifix. Sasha frowned. What is that? The finger of Saint Mary, June replied. A sacred artifact of the church. That's all I could gather. It's incredibly dangerous territory. Digging deeper would require more resources than I currently have. Natalia nodded understandingly. You've already done enough. Thank you. She typed something into her phone. Moments later, June's phone buzzed. June's eyes lit up as she checked her account. 10 digits. Holy crap! Natalia's serene smile remained. That payment also covers a new task. June's elation evaporated. What task? I want you to investigate the Horseman clan for Lady Sasha. June paled. What? That's a death sentence. Natalia's smile didn't waver. You've already accepted payment. Witches don't break their contracts, do they? June groaned, realizing she'd been cornered. Fine, but I'm not attacking anyone, just gathering information. That's all I ask, Natalia replied sweetly. June muttered curses under her breath as she activated a teleportation spell, disappearing in a flash of light. Once she was gone, Maria, who had been silent until now, spoke up. You're surprisingly devious for someone who always smiles. Natalia's gaze softened as she turned to Sasha. I hope this helps, Lady Sasha. Sasha nodded, her voice filled with quiet determination. Thank you, Natalia. I'll repay this kindness someday. Maria's revelation. Maria turned her gaze to Sasha, her voice calm but heavy with emotion. I can't speak for all vampire hunters, but for Carlos and me, it was just a job. We had no personal vendetta or grand crusade against vampires. Ruby and Natalia exchanged curious glances but remained silent, allowing Maria to continue. Carlos and I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, a poor and unforgiving place. We were both orphans, surviving on the streets. Maria's voice faltered for a moment as memories flooded back. Life was brutal. Each day was a fight just to make it to the next, and for a girl like me, well, the dangers were obvious. Her tone hardened with bitterness. I kept my purity only because Carlos defended me with everything he had. Even at 10 years old, he was stronger and faster than anyone else I'd ever seen. Ruby raised an eyebrow at this revelation, but Maria pressed on. At the time, I didn't understand why he was different. Later, I learned the truth. Carlos possessed what the priests call potential. He could tap into the energy of God more easily than others. Maria let out a small, weary sigh. To access that power, you need faith. I don't know what Carlos believed in back then. He never told me, but one thing was certain. He was strong. Her eyes softened as she recalled those years. For 13 years, we survived together. We stole, we fought, and we killed when we had to. We did whatever it took. Her voice darkened. Then one day, a priest approached us and offered shelter. At first, we didn't trust him, but something happened that made us believe in his sincerity. Maria trailed off, her expression making it clear she didn't wish to elaborate. The priest discovered Carlos' potential almost immediately. He was overjoyed, and though I was happy for Carlos, I was also afraid. I feared losing him. She gave a small, rueful laugh. I even auditioned to see if I had the same potential. I didn't, but I had something different. Maria's blue eyes darkened as she looked directly at Sasha. I had faith. A faint shimmer surrounded Maria as nearly invisible threads began to materialize, dancing protectively around her. I didn't have faith in God. My faith was in Carlos. For me, he was my God. Because of that faith, I could access the hunter's powers. My abilities were weaker than his, but my threads could ensnare even the strongest vampires, making me an asset. I became the strategist, and Carlos was the brute force. A moment of silence hung in the air before Sasha's cold voice broke it. Is this story meant to make me feel something? Maria shook her head. No, I'm just telling you the truth. She dissolved the threads and met Sasha's gaze evenly. Hunting vampires was good business. We were killing the monsters the church pointed us toward and earning enough money to survive. But after living among you, I've realized you're no different from humans. Her voice wavered slightly. Sometimes, I wonder if I could have chosen a different path. But when I think about the life I lived, I know I had no other choice. It was either join the hunters or descend deeper into crime. My hands were already stained with blood. Maria bit her lip as tears welled in her eyes. I don't regret surviving, But I'm paying the price for those choices now. And all I ask is this: don't kill Carlos. Please. He's all I have left." Sasha's expression remained neutral, though a storm brewed in her glowing crimson eyes. "Just imagine," Sasha's voice was low, trembling with suppressed rage. "You return home after a simple outing with friends. You're relaxed, at peace. But when you step through the door of your sanctuary, the place you trust most, you find the lifeless body of your god." Maria froze, her breath hitching. Sasha leaned closer, her voice rising. "And then you learn the person who killed them did it for money, just a job. Tell me, Maria," her eyes burned with hatred. "How would you feel?" Maria bit her lip harder, unable to meet Sasha's gaze. Sasha's voice thundered, her body crackling with lightning. "Tell me, how would you feel?" Ruby and Natalia flinched at the deafening roar of Sasha's power. After a long, tense silence, Maria finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I would feel hatred, loss, emptiness. Would you forgive the murderer of your god?" Sasha pressed. Maria's hands clenched into fists as she whispered, "I wouldn't." Sasha's lips twisted into a distorted smile. "Now you understand." Without another word, Maria turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. After Maria left, Sasha sat in silence for a moment before addressing Natalia. "Open the gate to Ruby's house." Natalia nodded, snapping her fingers to summon a galaxy-like portal. Sasha rose from her seat. "I'm heading out, Ruby." Ruby nodded. "I'll join you later. I have some business at the college." Without another word, Sasha stepped into the portal and vanished. Ruby sighed, speaking to no one in particular. "In the end, there's no good or evil, just the consequences of our choices." "You were right, Mother." Maria's breakdown. Natalia headed toward the kitchen, only to find Maria curled in a fetal position, silently crying in the corner. Natalia sighed, muttering to herself, "I'm not good with emotional people." Lucy's hideout. In a dimly lit office, Karen entered with a calm demeanor. "We've been compromised." Lucy, seated behind a grand desk, smiled. "Expected. What did they take?" "Only the basic plans," Karen replied. "Good." Lucy leaned back in his chair, tapping his chin thoughtfully. "Do we know who the intruder was?" "No trace. They appeared and vanished without detection." Lucy's expression darkened. "A witch, then? Only they could bypass our defenses like that." Karen nodded in agreement. "The Horseman clan has sent reinforcements." Lucy raised an eyebrow. "Oh, desperate for allies already?" "Yes, but something's off. They sent their 3 heirs." Lucy frowned, tapping his desk impatiently. "Sending their heirs into this mess? What are they thinking?" Karen hesitated. "Perhaps for protection? Clan Fulger's allies are loyal, and there are whispers of Countess Agnes, Snow plotting against the Horseman clan." Lucy smirked, his tone dripping with greed. "No matter. We'll complete the ritual before they have a chance to interfere. I have no intention of sharing the artifact's power with anyone." Karen matched his smile. "Neither do I."
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
"Darling." A woman's voice was heard throughout the forest. "That voice," Kagaya whispered. "Why?" Pepper was startled by the sudden voice. Victor stops what he's doing and looks in one direction with a smile on his face. Then he opens his arms and waits patiently. "What is he doing?" Lakis asked curiously. Kagaya looked at Lakis and replied in a neutral tone. "Taming a stalker." "Huh?" Lakis didn't understand. "Something is coming at a fast speed," Pepper warned in a gentle tone. Before Lakis could ask Pepper anything, a long, white-haired rocket hit Victor. Boom! Victor was thrown towards the trees, which broke with relative ease. But throughout the shock of the white rocket, he never stopped smiling. Lying on the forest floor, he lifted his head and looked into Violet's face. Then he said, "Welcome back, honey." He ignored the small deforestation this reunion had caused. He lifts his arm, then starts stroking Violet's head. Violet's face took on a crazed expression. "Aw, darling." She puts her face on Victor's chest and continues to talk like a broken record that repeated the same words over and over again. Darling, darling, darling. Victor just continued stroking Violet's hair with a smile on his face. I missed you, he said. Me too. I was worried that these by dash before she could finish. She heard someone's words. Oya? Who are you? Lakis asked. Tisk. Violet looked at Lakis with an ugly expression. But soon her expression became calmer when she felt Victor's caresses. Idiot. She is the heiress of Clan Snow. She is friends with Ruby. Pepper yelled in a voice cute. Who? Lakis turned her head in confusion. Pepper just looked at Lakis with a disbelieving look. You should socialize more, sister. Lakis snorted. I prefer training and sleeping. Socializing is for the weak. You only say that because you're bad at socializing. Lakis used her right to remain silent. Lady Violet, you took longer than expected, Kaguya said. Violet looked at Kaguya. Then she smiled. Good job, Kaguya. As expected of you. I'm going to raise your salary. Kaguya exhibited a small smile and placed her hand respectfully on her chest. Your words are an honor, Lady Violet. Victor sits on the floor, hugs Violet, and starts to smell her. Then he smells an unknown smell, a man. Pepper seems startled by something, and she quickly hides behind her sister. What's it? Lakis asked, looking at her sister. And nothing. Pepper refused to speak. Tell me, honey, did you meet anyone on the way here? Violet turns her face to Victor, and suddenly her body shudders. But it wasn't out of fear. It was something else. She flashes a big, distorted smile and replies. Yes, I found my father and mother. Oh. Victor's face returned to normal, and he smiled gently. How was your visit to your family? He started stroking her head again. Violet thinks for a moment and replies. My mom is still a narcissistic bitch, and my dad is still sick. Oh. Victor didn't know what to say when he heard Violet, but he had a doubt. Can vampires get sick? And my dad wants to meet you, is that okay with you? She looked a little hesitant. It's all right. This is a good opportunity to meet your family. He spoke lightly. I see. She flashed a happy smile. But before that, I should get back to training. Victor stood up while holding Violet like a princess. Then he leaves her on the ground and looks at Lakis. Let's continue? Lakis exhibited a thirsty smile and said, Of course. Victor walks to where he was, with Lakis following him. Did I miss something? Violet asked as she looked at Lakis with dark eyes. Lady Violet, calm down first, Kaguya said. Huh? I'm calm, look at my face. I'm calm, all right? She smiled with her sharp teeth bared. Sigh. Kaguya took a long breath and placed a hand on her brow. Lord Victor is training with Lady Lakis. We found that the best way for him to learn the basics is through fighting. Kaguya began to explain. N/O/vel/B C//OM. Oh, explain more. Violet was interested. We did a lot of tests with Victor, but in the end, he can't learn by logic, Pepper replied in Kaguya's place. Violet looks at Pepper and, when she looked at Pepper's breasts, clicked her tongue in annoyance. Why does all that witch's family have these big breasts? They're not even her real daughters. Darling isn't stupid? Why isn't he learning by logic? Violet asked as she tried to ignore Pepper's melon swaying with every simple move she made. Darling. Pepper's face turned red and, as smoke started to come out of her head, she began to mutter at supernatural speed. She seemed to enter her own world. Violet didn't understand Pepper's reaction. Yes, Lord Victor is not stupid, but he is very different from ordinary noble vampires, Kaguya continued. I know he's not normal after all. He's my darlings. Violet displayed a proud smile. Kaguya holds back the urge to sigh again and continues. When noble vampires go to do an action that, for our species, would be commonplace, they succeed naturally, right? Yes, Violet remembers that it was the same with her. Lord Victor doesn't work like that. If he tries to do a simple action, some explosion of power will always happen. He looks like a battery that contains a lot of power and never gets discharged. Because of that, he can't control his power to learn the basics. Boom! Victor was suddenly thrown into the sky by Lakis. Ha ha ha! He seems to be enjoying himself. Violet was a little annoyed. While he was in the sky, he suddenly made a move. Victor kicked the air and launched himself towards the ground, and when he did that, Violet could see that pure fire had gone out as he kicked the air. And when he was falling towards the ground, his body started to be covered by lightning. And when he landed on the ground, a little ice explosion happened. What in the seven hells was that? Violet asked in disbelief. As Lady Violet can see, any small actions Victor does, he unconsciously releases his powers, and because of that, he can't learn the basic skills of a vampire. Kaguya looks at Victor, struggling with a small shock in her heart. Didn't he notice? He's combining his powers perfectly. Is that what people call a genius? Victor went into combat again with Lakis. The red-haired vampire had a slight smile on her face, as she used only her physical strength to fight. Although sometimes, she had to use her fog powers to defend herself from the flames Victor unleashed. After all, these flames were dangerous even to her, who was a vampire that was over 400 years old. Unlike Pepper and Ruby, Lakis didn't have the power of water or ice. However, Lakis had the power to control the mist, and she generally uses that power to confuse enemies and flee. Small explosions can be heard when Victor and Lakis engage in combat. He always seems to be at full power and never gets tired, so we decided he should get tired first. Pepper recovered and spoke in a cute voice. As Lady Lakis had nothing to do, we decided she should fight Victor. But while the two of them were fighting, we found that he learns faster by fighting than explaining. Kaguya finished explaining. In the beginning, he wasn't managing to keep up with Lakis, but slowly he started to get used to his body. Now, he can give Lakis a decent fight. He's getting better really fast, Kaguya said. As expected from my darling, Violet spoke with pride. He reminds me a bit of my mother. Pepper commented with her finger on her cheek as she looked at Victor, who had a big smile on his face. How rude, he's not crazy and an old hag, Violet huffed. That was not what I meant, Pepper yelled, seeing that Violet ignored her, her cheeks starting to turn squirrel-like. Then she turned away. Humph. Boing. Boing. Veins started popping in Violet and Kaguya's heads. This bitch. Is she teasing me? Violet growled. Calm down, Lady Violet. We must not commit murder here. We must take her to a dark alley first, Kaguya suggested with a stoic expression. Oh, that's a good idea. Violet smiled dangerously. Pepper felt a shiver in her body, and since her instincts had always been good, she decided to slowly back away from Violet and Kaguya. Silently, she whispered as she walked away. But she didn't expect a big body to fly towards her. Kya! She screamed in fear as her body collided with Victor's. Oh, I'm sorry, sister, Lakis said a little regretfully. Ouch! Victor puts his hand on his head. This power to become mist is annoying. He spoke annoyed, but the smile never left his face. Every time I go to hit her, her body turns in fog, and she runs away. It's very slippery. I feel like I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know what it is. Feeling a heaviness on his chest, Victor looks down and sees Pepper's red face lying on his chest. It's decided. I'm going to kill this one bitch. Pure fire started to come out of Violet's body. When Violet was going to run towards Pepper and Victor, she was suddenly immobilized by Kaguya. Let go of me, Kaguya. Violet began to struggle. Although the idea of killing Pepper is interesting, I can't let Lady Violet do that. What just happened was clearly an accident. Kaguya spoke in a neutral tone. Wah. I'm sorry. Pepper was about to say something, but suddenly Victor stood up while holding Pepper like a princess. Fway! Pepper didn't know what to say, so she was silent as her face was completely red. He puts Pepper on the floor and pats Pepper's clothes to dust them off. Then, finishing knocking the dust off of Pepper's body, he squats down a little and puts his face level with Pepper's face. That is something he's needed to do a lot lately. Being 195 centimeters tall has its downsides. Then he says, smiling gently, don't be too inattentive while two people are fighting, okay? He appeared to be talking to a small child. And Pepper nodded. Good. Soon he gets up and looks at Lakis with eyes glowing red. His smile changed from a gentle smile to a distorted smile. Let's continue. Yeah, Lakis agreed. Kaguya and Violet were speechless when they saw Victor's attitude. They expected him to react differently when Pepper fell on him with those two melons. But why did he treat Pepper like a child? For God's sake, she's over 100 years old. A few hours later, Victor was still fighting Lakis, and he didn't seem to be tired. Victor was still glowing with energy, and he felt like he could fight for as long as it took. He looked like a child who was very excited about his toy. He's getting better too fast, actually. He's making fewer useless moves. How is this possible? He never fought from what I remember, Violet spoke as she placed her hand on her chin. She watched Victor for a long time, and she clearly remembers that he never practiced martial arts. Self-defense training with that wolf doesn't count as martial arts. After all, that's just self-defense. I don't understand this absurd progress. This is not as unusual as you think. Violet is startled by the sudden voice, and she looks up. Old witch. Don't scare me like that. Scathacker's face distorts for a few seconds. She suddenly moves at a speed Violet can't react to. Then she hits Violet's head with her fist. Ouch! Violet held her head. What are you doing, witch dash? Scathach hits Violet's head again. You never learn? Huh? Do you have chicken brains? Respect your elders. See? You yourself said you were old. Violet stuck out her tongue. Scathach looked at Violet with a neutral expression. You're actually a lot like your mom when she was younger. She looks at Victor and continues. Although your mom never had eyes for potential, you seem to be different. Of course, my darling has potential. He's my darling. Scathach looks at Violet's smug face with a blank expression. I take it back. You really are just like your mother. Huh. I'm different from her. She was about to say something, but suddenly she turned her face towards Scathach's mansion. Oh. Scathach flashed a curious smile when she saw Victor stop his training and look toward her mansion. Sasha, Victor and Violet spoke in unison. Huh? Why did you stop, Victor? Lakis asked curiously. Interesting, no matter how many times I see it, this is really something curious. Due to the magic and the ritual, their connection must have gotten stronger. And it seems that it wasn't only the connection that got stronger. Scathach's eyes seemed to glow blood red for a few seconds as she looked at Victor. Victor ignores Lakis, closes his eyes, and senses Sasha's messed up emotional state, and soon he sends his worried feelings towards her. Sasha, who just arrived at Scathach's mansion, looked towards the forest. Darling. Then, sensing the emotions that Victor sent, she displays a small, gentle smile. She closes her eyes and sends her thoughts, saying, It's all well. Another intruder. Today has been a strange day. So many visitors. Oh, it's Lady Sasha. Sienna suddenly appeared. Sasha's gentle smile fades from her face, and she assumes a neutral expression. Sienna, it has been a while since we have seen each other. Indeed. I know it's useless to ask this. But what are you doing here? I came to see my husband, Sasha said. As expected, she sighed. She flips her hair to her back and says, Do you want some advice? No, thank you. Sasha turned her face away and started walking towards the forest. Sienna just gaped when she saw Sasha rejecting her goodwill. She disappears and appears beside Sasha. What? I'm in a hurry. Sasha looked at Sienna. Listen to me. Young people these days are very rushed. She sighed. Then she continued. In vampire history, there has never been a man who was married to 3 heiresses from powerful families. She was going to start giving a sermon on Sasha. Yes. Sasha interrupted Sienna. If the younger vampires find out about this, they'll be jealous. And if the older vampires find out about it, they'll think the 3 most powerful families are lying, blah, blah. Sasha looks coldly at Sienna. Are you treating me like a child? I know what I'm doing, and if a problem happens, my husband and I will fix it. So your advice is useless, and you keep losing time telling me this nonsense. And are you going to look for a man to put out your fire? Sienna's eyes flashed blood red. She was clearly annoyed. It looks like you're not having a good time. Something must have happened. Sasha huffed. Yes, something happened. My family lost everything that was built for 2,000 years because of my whore mother, and the woman I consider my real mother died, murdered by church dogs. So yes, something happened, and I'm sorry if I didn't want to hear your bullshit. Sienna looked sympathetically towards Sasha, and that made Sasha angrier. Calm down. She's not to blame. You know that she heard Victor's voice. Sasha bites her lip and clenches her fist tightly. Then, she lets out a big sigh. She looks at Sienna with a regretful expression. I'm sorry, Sienna, but I'm not having a good time right now, okay? I just want to see my husband. I figured that out, and don't worry about what happened. I know what it's like to take anger out on someone who is innocent. Sienna was very understanding. Okay. Anyway, do you need something? Sasha asked. I'll talk to you later. Go see your husband. Sienna spoke the last word with a bit of disgust. Sasha's eyes changed to blood red as she saw the obvious contempt for Victor. But since she didn't want to conflict with Ruby's sister, she just turned her face away and started walking towards Victor. Seeing Sasha's reaction and remembering her own mother's reaction, Sienna's curiosity about Victor started to grow again, but also a feeling of disgust grew. How can they marry cattle? That's disgusting, she spoke as her body shuddered. Unlike Lakis and Pepper, Sienna learned of Victor's origin through conversations with Scat-Hack herself. After all, as Scat-Hack's eldest daughter, she always helped her mother in whatever she needed. Scat-Hack was a strong vampire, but she didn't care much for democracy or dialogue. She wasn't like that in the past, but she started to get numb the longer she lived. Now, she doesn't like to waste time on dialogue, and generally, she just does what she wants. Because of that, Sienna's assistance was needed. Scat-Hack needed someone to take responsibility for her territory, and someone to clean up her mess whenever she needed it. And since Sienna has a lot of respect for her mother, she did this job with a smile on her face. Besides, it's not like this job was bad. She has all the power that someone with the Vampire Earl title can have, and that influence is something she liked. I need to get back to work, Sienna spoke aloud as she started walking towards a place. Hey, witch, what do you mean that this is not unusual? Violet said as she was looking at Victor, who was fighting Lakis. Scat-Hack looked at Violet with a tired expression. Sigh. Is your brain really rotten? She sighed. NOVL__JNN. Violet ignored it and continued. I know my darling is awesome. After all, he is my darling, she smiled proudly. But I also know that what he's doing isn't normal. I think. Scat-Hack rolled her eyes, and then she looks at Victor. What he is doing now, fighting and learning while fighting, is not uncommon. Many warriors in the past have done this. And I can count on my finger the warriors who had this ability, warriors like Siyu Chulin, Hercules, Arthur Pendragon, Lancelot, etc. Violet looked at Scat-Hack in disbelief. You are really old. Scat-Hack makes a fist and hits Violet on the head again. Ouch! My head! She holds her head in pain. Scat-Hack looks at her fist. Now that I think about it, maybe I'm to blame for your being so stupid. Hitting you on the head since you were a little girl must have caused it. And there's your mother's genes in your blood, too. Stop hitting my head! Violet grumbled. Countess Scat-Hack seems to have a very high opinion of Lord Victor, Kagaya said curiously. Scat-Hack ignored Violet and looked at Kagaya. The ritual changed him. He was turned into a vampire, but not an ordinary vampire. Because of his blood, he became something else. She looked at Victor with a distorted smile on her face, and at the same time, he received the potential of 3 bloodlines. Clan Snow, Clan Scarlet, and Clan Fulgur, Kagaya said. We can ignore Clan Snow and Clan Fulgur. After all, one is a stupid woman, and the other is a useless woman who likes to bet, and in the end, she always lost the bet, Scat-Hack spoke in disdain. With just my bloodline alone, he could become very powerful, but as he has these extra bloodlines, he can become even stronger. And to improve his personality, he reminds me of me when I was younger. Her smile seemed to distort even more. I'm looking forward to the future, . Seeing Scat-Hack's distorted smile, Kagaya couldn't help thinking it was a bad idea to let Scat-Hack find out about Victor. I agree that my mother is a useless bitch, but my father is in my clan too. Scat-Hack looks at Violet with a disinterested expression. A man who has been exploited all his life? A man with the only quality of being handsome? A man who exists only to satisfy his mother's vanity? Boring. Violet wasn't offended by what Scat-Hack said. She was used to the woman's dirty mouth, but she couldn't help asking. You seem to know my father? Of course I know that man. In the past his mother asked me to save him from 2 strong women. What were their names again? I forget. They are not important anyway. Violet started to think about what she heard. She had suspicions that something like that happened to her father in the past. After all, he was very handsome, and that powerless beauty was just a curse. The two women were strong, but I couldn't even enjoy myself for very long. Well, seeing your mother, who was a psycho bitch, bending over to me for my help was a satisfying thing to see. She smiled with some amusement. I'd like to see that. Violet flashed a smile. Kagaya looked with an expressionless face at Violet, and she couldn't help but comment. Is Lady Violet really Countess Agnes' daughter? Violet looked at Kagaya. Yes, I am, but my mom is a very narcissistic woman. I grew up hearing the same words about how she was beautiful, how she was hot. It was fucking annoying. Thinking back to the past, Kagaya nodded in agreement. I feel bad for you, Scat Hack commented with a small smile on her face. It was obvious she was enjoying herself. Humph, Violet snorted. Victor, what is that? Hearing Pepper's curious scream, the three women look towards Victor. Soon they see something that shocks them. Victor was covered in lightning. His right arm was covered in pure ice, and his left arm was covered in fire. It worked. I knew something was wrong. Thank you, Lakis, Victor said, smiling at Lakis. Huh? Lakis was confused. But I didn't teach you anything. I just hit you. I learn a lot by watching the way you use your fog powers, he explained. Lakis looked at Victor in shock. Interesting. Scat Hack suddenly appeared beside Victor and looked him up and down, as if sizing him up. Did you manage to find your balance? She spoke as her eyes glowed red. Wrong. Victor shook his head. My powers aren't balanced. I'm using 80% of the lightning all over my body and 10% of the fire and ice in my arms. Oh. Scat Hack's smile grew a little. While I was fighting Lakis, I discovered several things about my own power. Victor's body suddenly returns to normal, and soon his body starts to catch fire. Fire is a very easy power to control, but if I just use fire, I start to feel angry, and any little things that happen, I get easily irritated. Victor was giving a much more intense feeling than usual as he spoke those words. This is normal, Violet said as she walked to Victor's side. What do you mean? Lakis asked curiously. The characteristic of my family's power is to amplify anger and any strong emotions the individual is feeling. For example, if I get jealous now, that jealousy of mine will be amplified by my power, Violet explained. Because of that, sometimes I lose control of my emotions. Isn't that just an excuse for your twisted personality? Pepper asked in a cute voice. Violet looked at Pepper with a neutral face. Sensing a bad feeling and fearing for her own safety, Pepper silently hid behind her mother. Victor flashed a small smile when he saw Violet's interaction with Pepper. The fire disappears from his body, and soon his body starts to get covered in ice. Secondly, ice is very difficult to control, and if I use it too long, I start to feel a feeling of indifference. I become very listless. He spoke in a cold, indifferent voice. Well, that's the hallmark of my power, though it doesn't affect me that much. Scat Hack spoke with a small smile on her face. Violet rolled her eyes. Of course, it doesn't affect you. You're a crazy bitch. Hearing someone approaching footsteps, the group looked at the individual. Welcome back, Lady Sasha. Kagaya greeted Sasha. I'm back. Sasha was going to say something, but her words caught in her throat when she saw Victor's body become covered in lightning. What? She wasn't believing what she was seeing. From her reaction, I think she doesn't know about Victor's powers. Does anyone mind letting her know about it? Lakis asked. Pass, Kagaya said. Boring, Scat Hack said. Laziness, Violet said. I'm tired, Lakis said. All the women looked at Pepper. Fway. Pepper looks at the women, then a pout appears on her face, and she says, Fine, I will do it. Pepper approaches Sasha and starts explaining to her everything that happened. Thirdly, lightning is a very unique power. It greatly increases my speed, and because of that I can't control it very well, but compared to the other two powers, lightning is more neutral dash. You're wrong, husband. Sasha suddenly stopped talking to Pepper and interrupted Victor. Victor looked at Sasha. My power was originally supposed to harm the vampire greatly, but thanks to my father's bloodline, this effect is negated, and the hallmark of my power is to amplify recklessness, she explained. Even though she didn't understand how Victor could use her lightning, she didn't want him to misunderstand her power. I thought he could only use Violet's power, she thought. Recklessness? Victor spoke. Yes, you're more likely to do reckless things when you use lightning too much, Sasha added, but soon she goes back to talking to Pepper. Oh, but I guess that doesn't apply to me? Victor spoke as he stopped using his power. That's because Darling is already so reckless. You get too lost when you're having fun. Violet smiled. Oh, dash. That's true, Victor can't deny it. Lord Victor has been training for over 21 hours, and you probably didn't even feel the hours go by, right? Kagaya spoke. Well, my timing is impaired because of this endless night. Victor looked up at the full moon. I was having a lot of fun, too. He flashed a big smile. Looking at Victor's smile, Kagaya sighed. Sigh. I feel like I'm going to sigh a lot in my life. She had a feeling her words were correct. I see. Scat Hack placed a hand on her chin. You haven't found a perfect balance. You're just using the powers in a way that doesn't impair your ability to think while fighting. Victor looks at Scat Hack. I've lost control of my actions twice in the past. I don't intend to make that mistake a third time. That's a good mentality. She praised him with a small smile on her face. Thank you, he smiled a little. Darling, Violet climbed onto Victor's back. Victor looked at Violet. You need to get some rest. She flashed a smile as her eyes glowed blood red. Understanding what she wanted, Victor agreed. You're right. Eh? Aren't you going to train anymore? Lakis asked with a pout. I will train later, he replied. Sorry, but that won't happen. Scat Hack flashed a distorted smile. Huh. Lakis looked at her mother in disbelief. I have a bad feeling about this. Kagaya whispered in a low voice. I could see what you were capable of doing today, and I know what kind of training is right for you. Her smile seemed to grow disproportionately. Rest for 3 days. You'll need it. Scat Hack turned, and soon everyone could just see the woman's silhouette. While running in the forest, Scat Hack said, how long has it been since I have trained someone with such potential? I think it's been 1,800 years. Well, it doesn't matter. She stopped thinking about it, but when she remembered she was going to train a man with so much potential, her body trembled in ecstasy. I'm excited. Then, without realizing it, her cheeks turned a little red, and her breathing became gasping. Her eyes glowed blood red, and she flashed a big smile that showed all of her sharp teeth. This is going to be fun. Ha 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 ha. She was having so much fun. Hearing Scat Hack's crazy laughter in the forest, Victor felt his body shiver. He was excited. Lakis and Pepper also felt their bodies shiver, but they weren't excited. They were scared. Well, Lakis looked at Victor with a sympathetic expression. I hope you don't get traumatized. Sniff, sniff, Pepper starts to get watery eyes, and she falls to the ground. I don't want my new friend to die. It's okay, sister. Lakis massaged Pepper's back. Victor won't die. I fought him, and I know he's strong. He'll just be a little traumatized, but that's normal. Sasha looked incredulously at Pepper and Lakis. Aren't you exaggerating? They are not exaggerating. Violet spoke with a lifeless face. She seemed to be thinking about something. That crazy witch is very Spartan. Remember, she is over 2,000 years old. Her training is not ordinary for today. Violet still remembers the time when she came to visit Ruby after training. Her friend had dead eyes, and when she heard Ruby narrate her training, Violet felt her body shudder. Unconsciously, she hugged Victor's back tighter. Sasha was worried. She looked at Victor, but she was surprised when she saw the big smile on Victor's face. Why are you smiling? NOVLB //JNN. Violet looked at Victor. He put a hand to his face, confused. I don't know, but I just find it all so much fun. Indeed, this is so much fun, ha 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 ha. He puts his hand on his face and starts to laugh. Sasha was speechless. Maybe, just maybe, I need to take my husband to the psychologist. She was taking it seriously. This kind of reaction is way beyond ordinary madness. Some hours later, Violet, Sasha, and Victor separated from the group, and they started walking through the forest until they found a massive tree. Looking at the tree, they decided to sit under it. By the time Victor sits down on the ground, Violet can't hold back any longer. She climbs into Victor's lap and bites his neck. Feeling Violet sucking his blood, Victor began stroking her hair while keeping a gentle smile on his face. Sasha sat on Victor's right side. As usual, she's in a hurry. Ha ha ha, if she wasn't like that, she wouldn't be my lovely Violet. He chuckled a little. Violet felt her body shudder as she heard Victor's words. Then, slowly, she stopped sucking his blood too hard and got more comfortable in his lap. Victor opens his mouth, and soon his teeth change. Wasting no time, he bites Violet's collarbone. Ugh, Violet moaned a little, but she didn't stop sucking Victor's blood. She looked very thirsty. Sasha looks at the moon and ignores the two for now. A part of her was jealous of Violet taking the initiative in front of her, but she was used to Violet's attitude. Because of that, she didn't try to think about it too much. A few minutes later, Violet stopped biting Victor and licked the blood from her lips. Her blood-red eyes slowly start to change to a violet color. Feeling satisfied with Violet's blood, Victor stops biting his wife's collarbone, and then he looks at Violet and smiles. Violet approaches Victor and starts licking his lips. My blood tastes weird, she grumbled. Really? Victor was curious. What does it taste like? Like normal blood? Victor was speechless and flashed an amused smile. I think vampires don't like to drink their own blood. Violet just closed her eyes and enjoyed Victor's caresses as she smiled. Victor leans his head against Violet's head. It's Sasha's turn. Violet's eyes began to darken, but Victor just displayed a gentle smile and kissed her mouth. n/o/vel/b/jan.c//om. Tongues began to fight over who was victorious. Eventually, Victor stopped kissing Violet. He caressed her face and said, "Don't think nonsense, you silly." Violet pouted cutely and slowly climbed out of Victor's lap, then sat on his left side. She holds his arm possessively and looks at Sasha while displaying a face that said mine. Soon she rested her head on Victor's arm and closed her eyes. Sasha rolled her eyes when she saw Violet's attitude. Victor chuckled, and with his right hand he patted his thigh. Looking at his gesture, Sasha's face turns a little red, and slowly she crawls and sits on Victor's lap. Now that I got to see you more closely, you've really gotten taller, Sasha commented in an attempt to avoid her embarrassment. Indeed. My evolution gave me a lot of things, Victor laughed. He tugs at Sasha's waist with his right hand, and then he feels Sasha's body brush against his. He lightly caresses Sasha's thick thighs. Sasha feels her body shudder at the sudden caresses. She tried to say something. Shoo. Victor puts his finger to her mouth with a silent gesture, then pulls Sasha's head to his chest and starts stroking her head. Are you okay? He asked in a gentle voice. Sasha's body shuddered at the sudden question, but soon she took a long breath and relaxed her body. She snuggled into Victor's chest and spoke in a slightly tired voice. Now I am. Victor exhibited a small smile. If you need to talk, I'm always here to listen. There was a moment of silence. Sasha flashed a gentle little smile on her face. I know, and I appreciate that. But right now, I just want to be like this. Then, slowly, she started to close her eyes. Victor just continued with a gentle smile on his face, and, as he stroked Sasha's hair, he stares into the moonlight. I didn't realize it, but he thought for a moment, then spoke aloud. What a beautiful night. Slowly, he closed his eyes. A calm and peaceful night. Victor's college early afternoon. Tisk. Ruby was upset. She woke up wanting to punish a certain vampire, but when she went to college, that vampire was gone. She looks around Corneliu's office and realizes that everything was untouched. It was like he was in such a hurry to get away. He must have gone back to Nightingale, she spoke in a cold tone. She turns and walks towards the exit. Well, he can't run away from me. She flashed a cold little smile. Director's office. What do you mean you're dropping out of college? It's just the beginning of the year. You can't drop out of college now. A blonde-haired man with a big fat belly spoke. Headmaster, I need to get back to my country. More important things than my college are going on. Ruby spoke in a neutral tone while crossing her legs elegantly. The director sighed and sat down in his chair. An emergency. He puts a hand on his brow. Indeed. She nodded. You know where I live, right? My mother is already a very old woman, and I need to go back to take care of her. Well, it's an emergency. The principal sighed again. It's a shame he's going to lose one of the most talented students in the college, but the student had a life of her own. He couldn't force anything on her. All right, I will provide the papers as soon as possible. Thank you, Director. Ruby exhibited a cold little smile. Then, slowly, her eyes changed to red, and she continues, "Can you do the same procedure for the student named Victor Walker?" Huh. The headmaster didn't understand, but when he looked into Ruby's eyes, it was as if all his worries disappeared. Unfortunately, something urgent happened, and he needs to get out of college. Oh, that's too bad. Yes, it will be done. The director spoke in a robotic voice as his eyes glowed blood red. Good. Ruby smiled as she remembered something. You don't need to notify the parents of the mentioned student. Yes, I will not notify the parents of the student mentioned. He repeated in the same monotone. Ruby got up from the couch and walked towards the exit. When the door closed, Ruby walked away from the headmaster's office. The director woke up from his hypnotic state. Huh? What was I doing? He thought for a few seconds, but he couldn't remember. He just had the feeling that someone was in this office a few seconds ago. Without him noticing, his eyes turned red for a few seconds, then disappeared, and as if by magic, all his worries disappeared. I must go back to work. I have to provide papers for the 2 students who are leaving from college. I think with that I got rid of the loose ends left by my darling and by Violet. I think I'll go home now. Ruby, who was walking the halls of the college alone, spoke to herself. Lady Ruby, you need to go to Lady Violet's mansion. 2 hunters were abandoned in that place. Ruby suddenly heard Luna's voice. Luna, you're back? She looked back and saw her personal maid. Yes, I needed to do something for your mom. Oh? And what did you do for my mother? I built a coliseum. She spoke in a proud tone as she patted her chest. Did you build it? Ruby's eyes narrowed in suspicion. I asked the witches to build it, but everything was supervised by me. She was probably sitting while watching the witches at work, Ruby thought. Ruby sighed at Luna's attitude and thought of the Colosseum. My mom is thinking about training my darling. I hope he doesn't get traumatized. Ruby looks coldly at Luna. I haven't forgotten what you did. You will be punished. But I was thinking of what's best for Lady Ruby. No excuses. I'm going to cut your salary by 90%. Ruby gave her ultimatum. As expected from Ruby, a kind woman, her punishment was very light. If it were with other vampires, the employee would have already died from this betrayal. But for Luna, this kind of punishment was just too scary. Luna's face darkened. Impossible. How am I going to buy my clothes on this small salary? Ruby looked at her maid in disbelief. Even if I reduced your salary by 90%, you're still going to earn $30,000. Isn't that enough? It is not. I spend $30,000 in one night. Your sense of money is totally broken. Ruby spoke flatly. Huh? Luna didn't understand. Never mind. Ruby turned her face away and started walking. Did you bring the car? Yes. Luna smiled. Good, I was tired of walking around in this black coat. Lady Ruby must look like a suspicious person on the street. Luna spoke in a teasing tone. Ruby looked at Luna again. Don't test your luck, or I'll cut your salary again. Please don't. I'll be quiet. Arriving at Violet's mansion, Ruby's car pulled into the garage. Luna got out of the car, opened the door for Ruby, and just as Ruby got out of the car, Luna stood in front of Ruby protectively. Lady Ruby Scarlet, a vampire who was Violet's servant, spoke in a neutral, respectful tone. Luna, what are you doing? Ruby asked. Sorry, I acted unconsciously. Luna smiled apologetically. Ruby looked at Luna and thought. Maybe she's thinking about that incident still? A maid who failed to protect her master must have affected Luna's mind in some way. n/o/vel/b/jen.c//om. Deciding that she must solve this problem in the future, Ruby looks at the man. Where are the prisoners? Follow me. The man spoke as he started walking. Ruby followed the man as she was accompanied by Luna, who walked behind her in silence and eyed the man cautiously. The 2 women followed the man into a dark basement that was lit only by torches. The prisoners are in this room. The man spoke as he pointed to a door, and then he disappeared. He's still around, Luna warned in a low voice. I know, Ruby said. Ruby wasn't too worried. These vampires were Violet's servants, and they didn't have the balls to do her any harm. Unlike some hunters who underestimate Scat-Hack's strength and madness, vampires knew all too well how crazy that woman could be. And Ruby wasn't weak either. She was trained by her mother, and there's a massive difference between a hunter with the rank of a general and those vampires who are only good for cannon fodder. Ruby walks through the door, and the first thing she sees is Jimmy and Thomas, two budding hunters who were captured by Violet and Victor. They were playing cards in a very relaxed way. She looks around and realizes that there is a lot of food lying around. They're feeding the pigs, she thought. Mr. Vampire, did you bring more food? Thank you so much. You can let Dash, Jimmy spoke, but he stopped talking as he looked toward the door. Who are you? Thomas asked as he turned away. Idiot. Jimmy hit Thomas on the head. Ouch! Stop hitting my head, dickhead. Thomas yelled angrily. Jimmy ignores Thomas and says, long red hair, and accompanied by a white-haired maid, and they're both vampires. How come you don't know them? Thomas looked at Jimmy confused. I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know, he snorted. Jimmy was speechless. Jimmy sighed and ignored Thomas completely. He gives Ruby a fake smile and says, Lady Ruby Scarlet, daughter of the most powerful female vampire in the world, Countess Scat-Hack Scarlet, what do I owe your visit to this humble place? Hearing what Jimmy said, Thomas opened his eyes in shock, and then he eyed Ruby warily. Ruby puts her hand to her chin like she's thinking about what to do. For her, these hunters weren't even worth her time. She's just here in front of these hunters because she wants to sort out the loose ends that her husband and her friend left in this town. She could clearly see that they were novice hunters. They wouldn't give her a lot of useful information. Seeing Ruby in silence and looking at them coldly, Jimmy and Thomas broke out in a cold sweat. Somehow, they could deduce they were in danger. Ruby kept thinking until an idea popped into her head. She flashed a cold little smile. Looking at the cold smile on Ruby's face, the two budding hunters knew they were fucked. Luna, bring me the magic contracts. Violet must have some in her personal room, but you're going to be alone, Dash. She wanted to protest, but she stopped talking when she saw Ruby's cold eyes. Do as I say. Yes, Lady Ruby, Luna bows in respect. Then she turns and walks towards the exit. Seeing Luna leaving the room, Ruby sighed inwardly. She changed her mind when she saw Luna's reaction. She thought to herself that she should solve this little problem as soon as possible. She didn't want an incompetent maid. Ruby faithfully follows the teachings of her mother and remembers what Scat-Hack once said in the past. Ruby, if you ever make a mistake, don't take it to heart. Try to learn from the mistake, and more importantly, try not to make that mistake in the future. Ruby agreed with her mother's thoughts. Repeating the same mistakes over and over again was just insanity. Ruby stops thinking about it. Then she looks at the hunters with her cold, indifferent eyes. First, clean up this mess, are you pigs? Yes, ma'am. Jimmy responded vigorously, and soon he got up and pulled Thomas. Help me, you idiot. I dash. Thomas was going to say something, but when he saw Jimmy's eyes like he was telling him not to say anything, he closed his mouth. Soon the two hunters began to organize the room. Not wanting to sit in a spot these two men have already sat in, Ruby creates an ice throne and sits on it, crosses her legs, and waits patiently for her maid to return. A few minutes later, Luna returned with 3 golden papers in her hand. These were magical contracts made by the witches. She handed the papers to Ruby and waited patiently beside her. Ruby took the papers. 3, huh? I didn't find any more magic contracts. I think Lady Violet only had these. Unexpected. I thought she would have more. After all, she has frequent contact with that witch, Ruby commented. Then she continued, well, 3 is enough. She stands up, bites her finger, and a drop of blood falls on a paper. The paper starts to glow slightly, and then Ruby starts speaking in Latin. Primo clausula. Perdition et mortem. Translation. First clause. Betrayal and death. When Ruby spoke these words, the gold paper began to float, and letters began to be written on the paper. Listening to what Ruby said, Jimmy, who had already tidied up the whole room along with Thomas, said, Fuck, we're fucked. His face darkened. Huh? Why are we fucked? Jimmy looked at Thomas with a tired face. Sometimes I'm envious of your simplicity. He sighed. Thomas didn't understand. Jimmy wasn't in the mood to explain, and he just looked at Ruby with a tired face. He seemed to have given up on trying to resist. He was already in the vampire's lair. What could two mere budding hunters do? Ruby flashed a cold little smile. Secundi clausula, magister et secreto. Translation, second clause, master and confidentiality. Great, just great. Jimmy already understood where this was going. Sometimes, being a smart guy is a curse. Tertium clausula, exploratorum. Translation, third clause, spy. The gold paper has stopped glowing gold. Ruby raises her hand and takes the paper. Then she looks at Thomas. The contract is simple. Be my spy. If you betray me, you die. If you leak information about this conversation, you die. If they find out you're under a magical contract, you die. This is basically a slave contract. Jimmy wanted to scream. Do we have choices? He asked. Ruby looks at her healing finger. No, you don't. Sigh. Jimmy sighed. He looked very depressed now. Thomas looked at Jimmy curiously and asked, Hey Jimmy, why are you so depressed? Something happened. This motherfucker. For a moment, Jimmy almost exploded with rage, but he swallowed that rage and tried to control his emotions. Just be quiet, okay? Don't make our situation worse. He spoke in a low voice as he bit his lip. Thomas nodded. Jimmy knows it was Thomas's fault that they were in this situation. He warned him several times to come back and stay close to the more experienced hunters. But he was obsessed with looking for the vampires alone, and in the end, they both got stuck in this situation. But despite knowing that, he couldn't lose control of his emotions right now. He needed to think about how to get out of this situation. The witch's contract can only be canceled by another witch. We can cooperate with that vampire now. And the first opportunity we meet a witch in the future, we ask her to void that contract. But canceling the contract requires an exorbitant amount of money. Fuck. Damned mercenary witches. Have you finished thinking? Ruby asked in a disinterested voice. Can we try to negotiate the terms of the contract? He asked, a little unsure. Ruby looked at Jimmy. Jimmy felt his body tremble with fear when he saw Ruby's cold gaze. You seem to be getting something wrong. She spoke in words that made both Jimmy and Thomas's spines go cold. You two are of no use to me, or to my husband. I just didn't let the vampires of this house feast on your guts, only for the reason I believe anyone can be helpful with a little encouragement. Death. It's a good incentive, right? She exhibited a small smile. The two hunters were silent, and they didn't dare say anything now. Then, what are you going to do? She asked and added, death, or become a spy. Luna looked at the slight smile on Ruby's face and couldn't help thinking that Ruby was having fun with this situation. She was very similar to her mother. They both have the same cruelty and sadism. The only difference is that Lady Ruby is not as crazy as her mother. After winning over two spies who have questionable competence, Ruby warned the vampires that they were Violet's servants to protect Victor's mother and father. She assured them that if anything happened to Victor's parents, they wouldn't have a peaceful death. Soon after that, she returned to the basement of Victor's house. Natalia, is everything ready? She asked, entering the room. Natalia, who was standing in front of a door, said, Yes, everything is ready, Lady Ruby. Oh, you're back, she looked at Luna. Yes, I'm back. Luna smiled at Natalia. She looks at the maid who was next to Natalia. Oh, so it's you? By looking at the woman's characteristics, she can instantly deduce who the woman was. Yes. The hunter who killed the vampires. The great villain of the story. Maria spoke in a sarcastic tone. Ruby narrows her eyes a little when she hears Maria's words. She looks at the maid, focusing her attention on Maria's lifeless eyes, and notices something. She gave up on resisting. Huh? A piece of advice. I suggest you don't say that in front of Sasha, Ruby warned. Yes, I know. She nodded. I gave up fighting, but I don't want to die being tortured, she sighed at the end. Ruby was speechless. What happened in the time she was gone? She looks at Natalia. What happened to her? Well, I had a little talk with her. I wanted to put her to work after all. She was basically a parasite that lay around in a catatonic state. And I unintentionally said that she or that hunter from the church would die anyway. You didn't lie. It's better to tell the truth than to feed a lie and raise false hopes. Natalia nodded in agreement. Luna approached Maria and poked Maria's face with her finger. What are you doing? Maria asked. I'm just curious. What are you? Luna asked. Ah. Maria didn't understand what she meant. I'm a leech, right? Why are you asking the obvious? You don't look like a vampire to me. She spoke as she looked Maria up and down as if assessing. You look like a dead human to me. Aren't vampires dead? It's not that. You look something like a vampire, but defective. Luna said, at least that's how I feel looking at you. Maria opens her eyes a little, and soon she remembers Sasha's words saying she was going to be a defective vampire. According to the words of Mike Dash. She bit her lip. She didn't want to say the word, but in the end, she had no choice. Master, I'm a defective vampire. Sasha did the ritual without the necessary materials. Ruby's face showed a slight annoyance. What was that woman thinking? She wasn't thinking about anything. She just wanted revenge, Natalia said. Ruby agreed with Natalia's reasoning. I hope this doesn't get out of hand, or I'll have to kill this woman. The race she has become is a hard curse to be exterminated if left unchecked. Ruby thought. Feeling a bad feeling about this, Maria asked Ruby, what do you mean? What have I become? Luna looked at her master curiously. Ruby was silent. You became a ghoul. Natalia spoke for Ruby. Ghoul. Maria tries to remember the church records. Ghoul, a vampire subspecies, the failed result of a vampire. They were used in the past as soldiers in war. Did I become that? Yes. Ruby continued. Maria didn't know what to say. She didn't really understand the ghouls. But, from the reaction of the vampires around her, she somehow feels she was in a much worse situation than she imagined. Ghoul, a subspecies of vampires. The failed result of a vampire. They were often used in warfare as cannon fodder, Natalia explained. According to my mother, vampires at the time used ghouls as a biological weapon. After all, you only need one bite or scratch from this creature, and you become one of them. So vampires usually threw a ghoul into town and expected that in less than 2 days, the ghouls would destroy the entire city if they weren't exterminated. Isn't that like the zombies in the movies? Luna asked. It's similar, at least in the way they propagate fast. Natalia said. She looks at Maria and explains, seeing that you're still conscious. You must have become a ghoul king, a kind of leader who is able to control them. Great, just great. She sighed at the end. Sasha is really vindictive. She chose the worst punishment a woman can have. Maria looked at Ruby, and she explained everything with a small cold smile on her face. It won't happen now because you've just died, but eventually your skin will start to rot. You'll eventually start to forget about things, and slowly, you'll lose your true self. In the end, you'll just become a beast whose only pleasure is killing and multiplying like a virus. Maria's face darkened. She bit her lip and clenched her fist tightly. Her body was visibly shaking. She lowered her head, and small tears started to fall from her face. This is very cruel, she spoke in a low voice. But since everyone in the room had supernatural ears, everyone could hear her. This is the consequence of your actions, and also the result of your weakness, Ruby spoke coldly. Indeed, if she was strong enough to kill Sasha, this wouldn't have happened. Maria said nothing. Ruby turns her face away and starts walking towards the door. But if she killed Sasha, her fate would be worse than becoming something like a ghoul. Trust me, there are far worse fates than the one you are suffering now. When Ruby grabs the doorknob, she turns her face and looks at Maria, who made a sudden movement. Maria ran towards the kitchen that was near the bedroom and took a knife and tried to pierce her head. She was trying to kill herself. It's useless, Ruby said as she looked at the knife that was inches from piercing Maria's eye. The master's orders are absolute. If Sasha doesn't allow it, you can't kill yourself. Fuck! Maria throws the knife to the ground. Luna and Natalia just looked at everything with cold, disinterested eyes. They didn't care a bit about Maria. Is the pointless joke over? Let's go back now. I need to see my darling. Ruby flashed a small, affectionate smile. Passing through the portal, Ruby finds herself in her personal room. My room. She looks around and realizes that nothing has changed since she left the house. Oh. Hearing a surprised voice, Ruby looks towards the voice and sees her mother. Mother! Daughter, you've finally come back. I was wondering if I would have to kidnap you too. Scat Hack exhibited a loving little smile. Hearing what her mother said, Ruby sighed. Where are my sisters? Sienna is at work, Pepper is sleeping, and Lakis is sleeping too. Sienna and Lakis, I understand, but why is Pepper sleeping too? I do not know. Maybe she got tired from training Victor? Scat Hack spoke like it didn't matter much then. She looked at Luna, and her eyes lit up. Is everything ready? She asked with a small smile on her face. Yes, whatever Countess Scat Hack asked me to do. I'm done. Luna spoke in a respectful tone. Good, good. Scat Hack can't help but smile a little more. She can't wait for 3 days to pass soon. Ruby sighed inwardly when she saw her mother's interest in Victor. Darling will be left with eternal scars after this training. n/o/vel/b/and.c//om. Luna, this is my house. I want you to treat them like my guests, Ruby said while pointing to Natalia and Maria. Even the ghoul? Luna asked to be sure. Don't call her that. She has a name, and yes, even her. Ruby spoke. As expected from Lady Ruby. You are very kind. Ruby looked at Luna. Wrong. I'm not nice. That's just basic etiquette. Yes, I know. Luna smiled with a smile that said, I understand everything. No, you don't understand. Ruby rolled her eyes and explained. Maria is Sasha's problem. It's my friend who should solve this problem. I'll only get involved if she asks for help. And since she didn't, that's not my problem yet. Yes, as expected from Lady Ruby. You have a kind heart. Luna flashed a smug smile. Ruby looked at Luna with a tired expression. Forget it, Ruby gave up. Come, daughter, let's talk. Seeing that the conversation ended, Scat Hack spoke to Ruby. Then she started walking towards the exit of the room. Okay. Ruby nodded and started to follow her mother. She looked at Luna for a moment with a face that said, Do your job. Luna looked at Natalia and Maria. Come on. I'll accompany you two to the personal rooms. Pass. Natalia held up her hand, saying, Luna looked at Natalia curiously. Natalia explained, I went back to Nightingale. My work as a maid is temporarily stopped until my master Violet leaves this town, so I'm on vacation. Envy, Luna commented. She wanted a vacation too, but due to the mistake she made a few days ago, she thinks it's going to be difficult for her to get a vacation. Natalia flashed a small smile when she heard what Luna said. She walked towards Ruby's wardrobe, then snapped her fingers. She opens Ruby's wardrobe and sees that the interior of the wardrobe has changed to a portal. She looks at Luna and says, I'm going to go back to my clan and enjoy my vacation days, see ya. Soon she goes through the portal, and the moment she goes through the portal is closed. Now that I've stopped to think about it, isn't she a human? What is a human doing in the vampire world? Maria asked. That is not so uncommon. Humans can always come to this world at the invitation of noble families. Normally, humans of high status in society are the guests. And that woman's family is just very special. They are direct servants of the king of vampires himself. Maria looks at Luna with a bit of shock. She never thought Natalia would have such a deep background. She thinks a bit about what she heard in the past when Victor was kidnapped. Clan Aliath, huh? Oh, how do you know that? I've heard Master talking in the past, Maria replied. Oh. Soon her face darkened a little. You're not supposed to know that woman is part of the clan who is the direct servant of the king. Maria was speechless when she heard Luna. Is this supposed to be a secret? Maria asked. I do not know. She spoke doubtfully. I think so. But seeing Maria's ability, everyone in the vampire world will associate her with that clan servant. Only ordinary humans shouldn't know anything. So I think it's okay. I'm not a human anymore. I've become that. She said the last part in disgust. Makes sense, Luna said, and soon dropped the subject. She started walking towards the exit. Come on. I'll show you to your room. Okay. On the porch of Scat Hack's mansion, two women were enjoying the tranquil mood of Nightingale's endless night. If strangers looked at them, they would think the women were sisters because of their identical appearance, but they could barely imagine that they were actually mother and daughter. Mother! Be honest with me. Ruby spoke in a neutral voice. Scat Hack looked at her daughter. Why are you interested in my darling? She looked in her mother's eyes for answers. Ruby knew that her mother was interested in people with great powers. An example of this is Sienna, her eldest adoptive sister. In the past, Sienna showed great potential, and because of that, her mother adopted her. Victor's potential is obvious. This is undeniable. Ruby still remembers the day that Victor assumed the form of Count Vampire, with only the awakening of powers. This kind of potential only appeared in the children of the King Vampire and Count Vampires. But if it were a small interest, Ruby would understand, but her interest in Victor is very abnormal. She went so far as to build an entire Colosseum just for Victor. Building a Colosseum was not cheap, and especially hiring witches for the service. NOVLB //JNN. Scat Hack's neutral face suddenly changed into a big smile. Ah, my sweet and beloved daughter, my precious little Ruby. You really have no idea what you've got yourself into? Ruby didn't expect this response from her mother. Scat Hack gets up from the chair she was sitting in, and slowly she walks to the front of the chair where Ruby was sitting. She kneels in front of her daughter and lightly touches her daughter's face. Look at you, so young, so innocent, so pure, like a little red flower that's just growing. I always had concerns that someone might try to deceive you. She started to caress her daughter's face. And mother? Ruby didn't understand her mother's sudden reaction. Because of that, I was always overprotective of you. Who knew I could feel like this soon? Scat Hack placed a hand on her chest, and her face showed a little disdain. In the past, I hated that feeling, but it's not so bad. Ruby looked at her mother's expression without understanding anything. In moments like this, when she was frustrated with herself, she always said that she understood her mother, but in the end, she couldn't understand anything. Mother, are you running away from the question? Ruby asked. Scat Hack exhibited a gentle smile. She looked at her daughter and stroked her face again. Who knows? Maybe I am, right? I'm an old person, and I get emotional easily. Ruby looks at her mother's smile with neutral eyes. Again, she always evades questions. She's like a slippery eel. She never gave me a satisfactory answer. How can I try to understand her if she doesn't say anything? I'm not psychic. This is frustrating. Since she was a little girl, Ruby has always felt like this. Just when she thought that she understood her mother, something happened that made her realize that she really didn't understand anything about her mother. For a child who wanted to be closer to her mother, it was frustrating, that was annoying, and most importantly, that was lonely. Scat Hack flashes a loving smile and tugs on both of Ruby's cheeks. FUA? Stop. Scat Hack, let's go over daughter's chubby cheeks. My little Ruby, don't try to understand me. You'll end up going crazy just like me. She strokes her daughter's head. Ruby looks at her mother, and she thinks, oh, I already know this pattern. She's going to say something like, a being who has lived for 2,000 years on this earth always has screws loose in their head. A being who has lived for 2,000 years on this earth always has screws loose in their head. Ruby repeated her mother's words in unison. Scat Hack exhibited a surprised face. Ruby flashes a slight smile. It's the same pattern. When you don't want to say something to me, you keep throwing these confusing phrases in an attempt to distract me. Scat Hack's smile began to grow. Then, unable to take it, she started to laugh. Ha ha ha. And that laugh only made Ruby's brain stop working again. Scat Hack laughed as if finding something very funny. After a few minutes of laughing, she looks at her daughter with a gentle smile. Ah, since Victor appeared, I seem to be laughing more. Ruby looked at her mother with a wary look. Mother? Seeing her daughter's gaze, she understood something. Oya? Are you thinking indecent things? You're already that age. What a perverted daughter I have, Dot. Ruby's face turned pure red. She never imagined her mother would tease her. Ha, you're so cute. Scat Hack pulls her daughter's head to her chest, and soon she starts stroking Ruby's head. It's different from darling, she thought when she felt her mother caress her head. Ruby sighed wearily and snuggled her head into her mother's breast. It's frustrating. I'm your daughter, but I can never fully understand you. For a moment, Scat Hack stopped stroking Ruby's head. Silly, it is impossible for someone to completely understand another being. Mostly understand someone like me. Scat Hack chuckled a little, and then she started stroking Ruby's head again. Ruby looks up and looks at her mother. Is there anyone who can understand you? For a moment, the face of a man smiling just like her appeared in Scat Hack's mind, but she shook her head inwardly, saying it was impossible for that to happen. Who knows? If there were someone like that, I would like to meet that person. Sometimes even I don't understand myself completely. I just do what I want. Ha ha. Sigh. Ruby sighed again. She snuggles her head in her mother's breast and says without looking at her mother, one day, I'll understand you completely. She made a promise to herself. Scat Hack didn't say anything. She just kept stroking her daughter's head. Then, slowly, she turns her face to the moon and thinks, my beloved daughter, I really wish that day will never come. After Ruby's conversation with her mother, the redhead decided it was time to visit her darling. Ruby was walking through the forest with an annoyed face. It was only when she left her mother's presence that she understood something. Sigh. Ruby sighed again. She tricked me. She stomped the ground in frustration. She wanted to ask about her mother's interest in Victor, but at some point, the conversation turned into a mother-daughter conversation, and she avoided the subject entirely. She's always like that. She steps on the ground again, and when she hit the ground froze completely. She ignored the frozen ground and yelled in frustration as she ruffled her hair. Gah! She always uses that lip service and deceives me. Damn it, I should have known this. But why do I always fall for this trick? With frustration building inside her body, Ruby looks at a poor tree with her eyes glowing red. Fuck! She closes her fist and attacks the tree. Boom! The poor tree flew towards an unknown place. Now that she was letting off steam, various feelings she had been holding in her heart started to come out. She remembers an arrogant blonde vampire, and that fucking arrogant son of a bitch. He always caused me trouble, and I had no excuse to kill him, but the first plausible excuse I find, he runs away. Damn it. She started attacking the surrounding landscape in frustration. Stones, trees, sand, plants, everything wasn't safe from Ruby. Violet, this spoiled bitch, always causing me trouble. Doesn't she know how hard it is to clean up her mess? Especially in that incident where she blew up a damn building in the middle of New York. She created ice out of nowhere and attacked a rock. I mean, I know she was angry at being harassed. I was angry too, but she didn't need to blow up the entire building. She could have just killed the man. This would avoid drawing the attention of humans, and it would also avoid problems with the Royal Guard. If it weren't for the fear that the Royal Guard has of my mother, we would be in much bigger trouble. Axe. She ruffles her hair again. She sighs a little relieved, but soon the frustration rises in her heart when she remembers something. Sasha isn't out of the loop either. Though she isn't as troubled as Violet, can't she be any less reckless? She was almost killed by hunters, and instead of looking for help, she isolates herself and doesn't accept anyone's help. Irritating. Doesn't she know how worried I was? Fuck. 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 She kicks the ground several times, and every time she kicks the ground, little ice explosions occur, so the whole area around Ruby feels like a pretty epic battle has taken place. And Darling is very insensitive, because he hasn't come to find me yet. Doesn't he know how much I miss him? And why am I having such strong feelings for someone I just met? Ask. She ruffles her hair again. After screaming in frustration, she puts her finger to her lips and thinks, it's his blood, right? It's his blood that made me interested in him, right? She tried to convince herself that this was it. But what is this feeling of obsession? I feel like I want him just for me, and I get annoyed when Sasha and Violet are around. I want to kidnap him and lock him up in a basement. I want him just for me. Aya, what are these feelings? She was very confused. She lays on the ground and looks at the moon for a long time. She sighs. Then she says, it's all Violet's fault. Yes, it's all Violet's fault. She always loses sight of what's important when she's angry. And I have to clean up her mess later. If it was not Dash, she was going to say more, but stopped when she heard something. Whistle. She heard someone whistle. Who's there? She stood up and looked at the visitor in a fighting stance. As the moonlight illuminates the visitor, Ruby's face darkened. "Dee darlings?" "Yo." Victor smiled gently as he looked at Ruby's disheveled appearance. "Look how dirty your beautiful red hair is." Victor spoke in a gentle tone as he arranged Ruby's appearance with his hands. "When did you arrive?" Ruby didn't move. She was paralyzed. "From the part you said, she tricked me." Victor displayed a sneaky smile. Ruby's face changed expression several times. Victor watched with curiosity as Ruby's face changed to a shocked expression, then an embarrassed expression, then an angry expression, and finally a resigned sigh. "Sigh. If you were there, you could have called me." She had a very dejected expression. Finishing fixing Ruby's messy hair, Victor spoke with a big smile on his face. "Hell no." Ruby didn't expect that answer. "I didn't want to miss this show." Victor spoke as he pointed to the landscape around him, a rare moment of my wife who is usually cold and aloof, venting her emotions. "I will never miss this opportunity. Look, I even recorded it to see in the future." He takes out his cell phone and shows Ruby the video. Ruby's face immediately turned crimson red when she heard Victor's words, and her face turned completely red when she saw the video Victor recorded. N/O/vel/b//n.c//om. "Delete! Now!" Ruby yelled. Victor showed his face in horror. It was as if Ruby had asked him to do something inhumane. "I wouldn't commit such blasphemy. I need this video to show my children in the future how cute their mother is." "CC child. Why you? T this dash." She was trying to say something, but because of Victor's words that caught her off guard, she wasn't managing to form a coherent train of thought. Victor felt his heart being hit by an arrow when he saw Ruby's face. My wife is so cute." Victor suddenly hugged Ruby. Ruby's face got redder when she heard Victor speak. Instinctively, when Victor hugged her, she started to struggle. She didn't even know what she was doing. She just wanted to get out of here and hide in a hole. She was so embarrassed. "Let go of me." "Never." Victor spoke with a conviction that shook Ruby completely. Ruby stopped struggling and looked at Victor. Seeing Ruby's cute face looking at him, he unconsciously displayed a gentle smile and kissed her. Not expecting this surprise attack, Ruby was completely melted in Victor's arms. She couldn't gather the strength to do anything else. Why am I fighting? He's my darling. I'm just supposed to accept everything." She thought with her mind a little shaken. Then she wrapped her arms around Victor's neck and kissed him back. A few minutes passed, and Victor stopped kissing Ruby. When he stopped kissing Ruby, a bridge of saliva connecting the couple's mouth formed. He looks at Ruby's red eyes and Ruby's erratic breathing. He understood what she wanted, displays a gentle smile, and shows his neck eat. Ruby wasted no time. Her teeth changed into sharp fangs, and soon she bit Victor's neck. Ugh! Victor held back the moan as he felt Ruby's fangs pierce his neck, and, if that wasn't enough, he felt two mountains that were quite soft against his chest. He holds Ruby by her ass, and when he felt Ruby's entire body, he thought, "This body is just very unfair. It feels like I'm hugging a very seductive succubus. I feel like I'm going to lose myself in lust if I don't control myself." Having sucked the blood from Sasha and Violet, the only one left was Ruby to quench Victor's thirst completely. Soon a primordial desire began to rise in Victor's body. His eyes changed to blood red, and sharp fangs replaced his teeth. He pushed Ruby's shirt back a little and bit down on his wife's collarbone. Ruby moaned very loudly. For some reason, her legs were feeling very weak now. She also felt a clear liquid that was leaking from her secret place. This liquid was making a mess with her pants. Victor didn't understand why she reacted so strongly, but he didn't have time to think about it when the taste of blood touched his tongue. Unconsciously, he tightened his grip on Ruby's thick ass. Ruby wraps her legs around Victor's waist. When she does this, she feels something thick touching her intimate place. Darling, she looks up at the sky with unfocused eyes. She seems to be very ecstatic. She licks the blood that was running from her lips. This blood is very tasty. Ruby's eyes begin to glow blood red. Darling. Again, she bit Victor's neck. A few minutes later, when the couple was completely satisfied, Ha, look what a mess we made, Victor chuckled when he saw the messed up state of his and Ruby's clothes. Ruby looked at a specific region of Victor's body. He reacted to me. For some reason, she was very happy. Seeing where his wife was looking, Victor flashed a sly smile. Are you curious? Do you want to see? He held his pants like he was going to take them off at any time. Huh? And no, I do not want to. Ruby turned her face to the side. Victor appeared beside her. Are you sure? Yes. Despite saying this, unconsciously, she looked again at the hard member. Victor added information. When I evolved, I noticed that all the muscles in my body grew and became denser and stronger, and as that limb is a muscle, he didn't need to continue. After all, Ruby was an intelligent woman. Swallows. She swallowed hard, and indecent thoughts began to form inside her head. Just imagining her being ravaged by Victor, a sense of anticipation began to grow in her heart. Victor's smile grew. He approached Ruby and lightly pulled the tip of Ruby's nipples that were hard as stones. Ruby's face turned red, and she pulled away from Victor quickly as she covered her breasts. What are you doing? Teasing my wife. Ruby's face turned completely red, then she turned her face away again as she pouted. Victor appears beside her again. I can't help it. My wife, who is usually cold and distant, is showing so many reactions. Somehow, I feel like my sadistic side is waking up. He blows in Ruby's ears. Ruby walks away again. Stop. Despite saying this, her face was completely red and panting. Okay, I'll stop. Victor backed away and spoke, still smiling. Ruby didn't expect this answer. Somehow she got. He appeared again beside her. Are you just disappointed now? She showed a face that said, How did you know? I have a very perverted wife. Huh? How lucky. Ruby's face starts to turn completely red, and soon, a small explosion happens in her head. Idiot! She screamed. When Ruby tried to run away from the situation. You can't run away. Victor holds her like a princess and starts walking towards the place where Sasha and Violet are sleeping. Let me go. She started to struggle as she screamed. Victor squeezes Ruby's ass a little hard. If you don't stop, I'll continue what I was doing before. Ruby looked at Victor with a blank expression. Let me go. She screamed louder and began to struggle. Victor looked at Ruby with an incredulous expression, but slowly his smile started to grow. He kissed Ruby's mouth. Humph! Ruby was taken by surprise, but soon she returns Victor's kiss. A few seconds later, when Victor stopped kissing Ruby, I never thought my wife was a masochist, he chuckled. Ruby's face turned completely red, and she turned her face away in an attempt to hide her embarrassment. She completely gave up on running away now. Masochist? Me? How absurd, she thought. Victor displayed a gentle smile and then started walking again. As he walked through the forest carrying Ruby like a princess, Victor's eyes glowed blood red for a few seconds, and he stared at a distant spot in the forest. Seeing two individuals up in a tree, Victor exhibited a smile that wasn't a satisfied smile. After all, he wasn't an exhibitionist, and he didn't want anyone to see that side of his wife, even if these individuals were Ruby's sisters. It somehow developed into something exciting. Lakis stuttered a little, with a slightly red face. Why? Pepper nodded, her face completely red. The two sisters were originally sleeping, but when they heard Ruby's voice in the mansion, they quickly woke up and went after the younger sister. They were missing Ruby so much, but they didn't expect them to see this scene. Somehow, I'm feeling that seeing this scene, it's going to come back to bite my ass in the future. Pepper spoke with a grim face. Lakis was silent. She knows Pepper's instincts are usually correct. Soon she shrugs as if it's not important. Well, he won't hurt us. After all, we're related to his wife, and we didn't do any harm to Ruby. She understood a little of what Victor's personality was like. In simple words, to understand, Victor was like their mother. Fuck, now that Lakis thought about it, he really had their mother's personality, and if one thing their mother knew how to do was tease people when she wanted to. But despite not liking to be bothered, Lakis was a little expectant about what Victor was going to do with them. Sister, stop NTR fetish, Pepper spoke in a Lakis ear. Kya? Lakis was startled by the sudden voice and yelled in a surprisingly cute voice. She looked at Pepper. "What are you doing?" Suddenly her face turned a little red. "I don't have an Endar fetish." Fond Pepper stares at Lakis in a way cute. "What? How do you know what NTR is?" After all, that wasn't a word ordinary people knew. Lakis used her right to remain silent. Scathack House, 2 days later. At a ridiculously large table, several people were seated. And, not far from the table, Luna, Kagaya, and Maria were waiting to take any requests from their respective masters. "Victor, I'm really wondering if it was the right decision for my mom to bring you here," Sienna asked. She was sitting next to Lakis and Pepper. "Oh." Scathack looked at her daughter with curious eyes. Victor, who was sitting on a couch next to Violet, Ruby, and Sasha, looked at Sienna with a disinterested look. Question. He continued with the same disinterested look. Then he added, "Are you the owner of this mansion?" "No," Sienna denied. "Then why are you poking your nose in matters that don't involve you?" Pepper broke out in a cold sweat when she heard what Victor said. Violet and Sasha looked at Sienna with a neutral gaze. These past 2 days, all you've done is just play with your wives?" She wanted to offend him, but she didn't want to offend his wives, who were her friends. In the end, she didn't know what to say. "I can't sleep because of the noise. I'm doing what your mother asked me to do." Victor flashes a sneer. "I'm relaxing, duh." Sienna frowned. "If you're so upset, why don't you move somewhere else? Or rather, why don't you ask your mother about it and throw me out?" Crack. Unconsciously, Sienna broke the wood of the table. "Moving to another place? That is impossible. She always wants to be close to her mother." Question her mother? She would rather die than do something like that. She respects her mother a lot. Sigh. Ruby sighed. "Can't you get along with her?" She spoke while looking at Victor with the same cold face as always. Victor felt his heart moved. It's been a few days since his and Ruby's relationship progressed, and he understood better his wife, who didn't show many emotions. He wanted to get along with Sienna, but in the end, he couldn't lie to himself. "It's impossible," Victor said. "Impossible," Sienna agreed. "She looks at me like she's looking at a cattle." "I don't like that," Victor said. He didn't really care about Sienna. He just wanted to get along with her because of his wife. But he was never a man who accepts being stepped on by other people. Even before he turned into a vampire, he was a very vindictive man, and he doesn't care if she's Scathack's daughter or Ruby's sister. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and blood for blood. That's how he thought before, and that way of life has only been enhanced by his evolution to a vampire. "But isn't that what you are? A cattle?" She smiled disdainfully, but soon her expression changed to neutral as she felt the air of the 3 women standing next to Victor change. "Bitch, repeat what you said." The air around Violet began to heat up, her face distorted, and she looked at Sienna like she was going to pounce on her neck at any moment. "Big sister." Ruby didn't say much, but from her cold stare and the chilling temperature around her, Sienna could tell she was furious. "Sienna, I suggest you don't say this in our presence," Sasha advised coldly. She was trying not to act too reckless despite being annoyed. Sienna looked at all of this with a little shock. Violet is understandable. She has the same personality as her mother, but Sasha and Ruby too? How did he get their affection so fast? Sienna thought. "I'll be careful." She backed off. Sienna was very fond of Ruby, and she didn't want to get into conflict with her sister. The interest she had in Victor still remained, but from the moment she learned that Victor was a human in the past, half of her interest was lost. However, she was still curious to know how a commoner had so much power. "Kaka," Scathack laughed as if she found it all funny. She shook her wine glass of blood. "She must be irritated because, since you arrived, she can't sleep." "Yes, I can't sleep either." "What in the name of the 7 hells are you doing in that room?" Lakis added. Pepper's face turned red with embarrassment. Victor patted Violet's and Ruby's head, who were beside him. Since that moment in the woods together, Ruby seems to have acquired some of Violet's personality traits. Feeling Victor's caresses, Ruby's face continued with the same cold expression, but the air around her became more peaceful. Violet was more expressive. She just flashed a satisfied smile and ignored Sienna. Relaxing with my wives, he replied to Lakis. Pepper's face turned redder. Then, feeling Victor's gaze on her, she quickly turns away and ignores everything. Can't you make it more silent? I want to sleep, Lakis commented in a low, shy voice. Impossible. I can't control my wives' voices. He chuckled a little. Fuck it. She cursed under her breath. Kaka. Don't tease my daughters so much. Scat Hack laughed, and then she added with a big smile. Or do you want to feel my teasing? Mother? Ruby and Sienna spoke at the same time. I'm looking forward to it, he replied with a Scat Hack-like smile. Suddenly Victor felt 3 fists in his stomach. Oof, he looks at his wives. Oh, Scat Hack found it all very interesting. Darling, what are you implying? Violet asked with blank eyes. Indeed, don't flirt with my mom, Ruby spoke in a colder voice than usual. Husband, control yourself? Or do you want to lose your little brother? Sasha threatened. Victor's whole body shivered. Then his smile grew disproportionately. Ha! He started to laugh. The 3 women didn't understand his reaction. Sigh. He really has problems with his head, Sasha said. Suddenly she felt someone kissing her face. She looks to the side and sees Victor smiling. Yes, I have head problems, he nodded in agreement. Then he looked at his 3 wives with a gentle smile that looked like it was being lit by the sun itself. I just love my wives too much. Sasha, Ruby, and Violet received critical damage from this unexpected attack. And the damage didn't stop there. The damage swelled and spread AoE and hit Lakis and Pepper. Wah. Pepper began to shake her head several times to get the indecent thoughts out of her head. Lakis just looked at her sister as if she had lost her mind. Sigh, Lord Victor is becoming a playboy, she commented in a low voice. I've never seen Ruby with that expression, Luna commented. Maria just looked at everything with a neutral gaze. Ruby turns her face to the side, and her sisters could see that her ears were a bit red. Sasha did something similar to Ruby. She was not used to this display of affection in public. Violet simply hugged Victor possessively and started saying, Darling, darling, darling. Victor chuckled a little and started stroking Violet. You're good at this, Sienna praised. She realized what he'd done. Victor looked at her, confused. Seeing Victor's genuine expression, Sienna thought, don't tell me he did all this naturally. Seeing that Sienna didn't say anything, Victor lost interest. He looked at Scat Hack and saw the wine glass in her hand. Blood! His eyes changed to blood red, and unconsciously, he thinks in disgust, rotten blood, and soon he gets up from the couch. His wives didn't understand why he suddenly got up. He walks to Scat Hack's side. Allow me? Scat Hack looked curiously at Victor. Seeing his gaze on the cup, she was curious about what he intended to do, so she hands the cup to him. Victor takes the cup and dumps all the liquid on the floor. When he did that, his face had an expression of disgust. Seeing that the cup was empty, he bit his wrist with his sharp teeth, and soon his blood spilled into the cup. Darling, what are you doing? Violet practically screamed. She was going to jump towards Victor, but she was stopped by Ruby and Sasha. What? She looked at Ruby and Sasha. Just watch, Ruby said, and Sasha nodded. Ruby and Sasha expected to see something interesting. After all, they know that when Victor's blood leaves his body, it loses its delicious taste and turns to blood with a disgusting taste. Smelling blood in the air, every vampire in the room was hit with a strong scent, and all of them, without exception, were influenced in some way. That is, Sienna gulped. She could now understand the girl's obsession. The smell of blood was very delicious. That looks good, Lakis muttered. Pepper just looked seriously at Victor's blood. Unconsciously, she started drooling. The aroma is better than before, Kagaya thought with an expressionless face. Ugh. Maria clenches her fist and swallows hard. She somehow tries to hold back her instincts to jump on top of Victor and devour his body. She was the one most affected by the scent of blood. She too was confused. Why didn't I feel this before? She remembers seeing Natalia draw Victor's blood, but she didn't react as strongly as she did now. Seeing that the glass was full, he nods his head satisfied. Then he lifts his wrist, and in less than a second, the cut he made has regenerated. Try it. He offered the cup to Scat Hack. Scat Hack looked at the goblet filled with blood. Smelling the yummy aroma, she asked, "What do you intend to do with this?" She swallows dry at the end. "I don't know," he replied, smiling. "Huh? I just felt it was the right thing to do. So what are you going to do?" She hesitated for a few seconds, but soon she reached out and took the cup. Victor just waited with a smile on his face. He didn't know why he offered his blood to Scat Hack, but one thing he was sure, something interesting was going to happen. Something inside him said that. Scat Hack brings the cup to her mouth, and slowly she drank. The moment Victor's blood touched her tongue, Scat Hack's eyes glowed pure red, and soon she had turned the cup over. Gulp! Gulp! She drank the blood like she was someone who found water for the first time in her life. She was dying of thirst. Sienna, Pepper, and Lakis didn't believe what they were seeing. Lord Victor made another mistake. Now this madwoman is going to get even crazier, Kagaya sighed as she spoke in a low voice. Oh? Who are you calling crazy, mate? Your owner, of course. Or isn't she crazy? Luna didn't know how to answer that question. After all, she knew it was true. Kagaya looks at Maria, who was slowly looking like someone who would lose control at any moment. Slowly her darkness began to spread and cover Maria's shadow. Just in case. How did she manage to drink that bad-tasting blood? Sasha commented. She thought she was going to see something interesting, but she didn't expect that. Explain. Violet didn't understand. She was angry because other people drank Victor's blood. I think his blood is only bad for us. After all, we're used to drinking straight from the fountain, Ruby deduced. So, for someone like Scat Hack who has never drunk straight from the fountain, his blood is delicious. Sasha looks around and notices the vampire's reactions. The scent of his blood is very effective too, although it doesn't affect us. Maybe it doesn't affect us because we're not thirsty, Ruby said. They had spent 2 whole days feasting on each other's blood. Huh? What is happening? Explain now. Seeing Violet's irritated face, Ruby and Sasha sighed, and then began to explain what Natalia had done. As this happened, Victor flashed a small smile as Scat Hack drank all of his blood. He heard the sounds of chains from somewhere. He looked around and even used his vampire vision, but he couldn't pinpoint where that sound came from. Realizing that Scat Hack had finished drinking his blood, he stopped looking for the sound of the chain and focused his attention on his mother-in-law. What do you think? He asked. Scat Hack lowers the cup, drops it to the floor, and hears the sound of glass breaking, but she doesn't care. She starts breathing heavily and erratically. It was like she was intoxicated by something. Her cheeks get red, and she looks at Victor with her eyes glowing blood red. Look how you got dirty. Victor approaches Scat Hack and uses his hand to wipe the blood from her mouth. Don't drink so fast next time. You might choke. For a few seconds, silence dominated the room. It was as if everyone forgot to breathe. They were just too shocked to see Victor treating Scat Hack like she was some kind of kid who needs help. Boy! She took a moment to control her breathing, but soon she spoke in a serious tone. You're playing with fire. Don't worry. I'm immune to fire. He continued to smile as he stroked her cheek. Scat Hack's smile grew, and an obsessive look began to appear on her face. How are you feeling? Victor asked as he backed away. He was feeling 3 stares piercing his back. Seeing Victor walk away, Scat Hack's eyes lost their intensity and became calmer, and after a few seconds, her eyes returned to sapphire green. I'm feeling better, and my head isn't hazy like it used to be, but... Her eyes went back to blood red. That's still not enough. Omo. Bloodlust, huh? He said. Side effect of losing the husband. She spoke dismissively. Yes, I heard. Victor laughed and continued. Apparently, you killed your husband. Oh? Were you scared to hear that? Scared? Pfft. He shrugs nonchalantly. If you killed him, you probably judged him as pointless or impotent. Huh? How are you so sure about that? It could be something else that led me to kill him as an important reason or something. Don't talk like you know me. Victor rolled his eyes. Scat Hack, please. Don't treat me like a fool. I may have only known you for a little while, but one thing I'm sure of, you're not crazy. Well, not totally. He chuckled a little at the end. Scat Hack continued to look at Victor neutrally. Victor's smile grew. His eyes changed to blood red, and his teeth changed to sharp fangs. You were bored, right? He approached her face. Slowly, Scathacker's smile grew. Such a boring man, a man without potential, a man who doesn't train, blah blah. There are several reasons, but the main one was boredom. He wasn't like you, he didn't want the same goals as you. And from the beginning, you weren't interested in him. You just took him because he had powers that matched your own power. A tool. That's what he was, and when he fulfilled his purpose, he clenched his fists in front of her. You eliminated him. Indeed, you got it right. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Victor, but one question remained. How did you know my reasons? You speak as if you were present. I just took your past into consideration. He withdrew his hand from her front and pulled back a little. Oh. Countess Scathach Scarlet, a vampire over 2,000 years old, a cold and crazy woman. With just this little bit of information, someone with 2 IQ can deduce a little bit of your personality. The rest was a guess based on my few experiences I had with you. Victor smiled. 2,000 years old, you've experienced a lot of wars, a lot of tragedy. And you probably had a lot of fun in those wars, huh? For such a person, the end justifies the means. Indeed, the reckless woman. Ha 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 ha. You are right and wrong, she laughed amusedly. Oh. In the past, I was more cautious, but after I realized that I got so much stronger than the beings in this world, I stopped worrying. The law of the fittest, huh? Understandable. After all, who in this world could challenge Scathach? He spoke, smiling. Indeed, she smiled. Then she replied, only one man could fight me, but he's very boring and prefers to rule this mess he calls Nightingale. And when he's not doing that, he's been sleeping for centuries. He's probably rusty from not training for millennia. Victor displayed a distorted smile. Who is this man who is capable of fighting you? The king, the first original, and the progenitor of all vampires. I see. Victor's smile grew and widened erratically. He was even feeling his heart pounding with emotion. Take that smile off a little, brat. If you can't even fight me, you can forget about trying to fight that man. She advised him. I don't feel like fighting him. Victor lied. He didn't want to fight that man, but not now. That would just be suicide. Oh, I was just happy that there are people stronger than you. He spoke the truth. Upon learning that there is someone stronger than Scathach, he realized that saying, there is always someone stronger than you, was true. Scathach's face distorted a little. He's not stronger than me, but you're not 100% sure you could beat him fighting, right? He doesn't have the title of progenitor just for decoration. She was speechless for a moment when she heard Victor's words. Ha, you're right. She laughed casually. Sienna, Lakis, Ruby, and even Pepper were speechless when they saw their proud mother admitting it so casually. They were also feeling jealous to see their mother laughing and talking casually to Victor. She never did that to her daughters. Mother? Sienna spoke. She looked at her daughter. Seeing her mother's bored face, Sienna bit her lip a little. Why did you call this meeting? Oh? Indeed. What was the reason? She completely forgot. Mother. Sienna sighed and looked at Luna. Seeing Sienna's gaze, Luna yelled, yes. Then, she disappeared and soon returns with a letter in her hand and hands it to Sienna. Realizing that his conversation with Scathach had ended, Victor walked towards the sofa, where he was sitting, and sat down among his wives. Darling, what the fuck are you doing? Victor was speechless. Talking. He answered honestly. To me, it looked like you were flirting with my mother. Are you crazy? Ruby spoke in a cold tone of voice. Treason is not allowed. If you betray me, I will kill you. Sasha warned in a serious tone. Weren't those my sentences? Violet looked at Sasha, who completely ignored her. Being honest with herself, Sasha couldn't kill Victor like Violet. She'd just lock him away somewhere, so he could be safe. Victor wore a genuinely confused face. Sasha, seeing Victor's confused face, was speechless. Is he doing this unconsciously? She focused on her connection and saw Victor's superficial thoughts. Why are they angry? I was just talking normally. Where in the 7 hells is this normal? She practically screamed. The women in the room looked at Sasha. Sorry. Her face turned a little red. She looked at Ruby and Violet. Use that. Oh, I forgot about that, Violet said. Oh. Ruby just opened her mouth a little. n/o/vel/b//n.c//om. The two concentrate and look at the superficial thoughts of Victor, who was looking at them. My wives are so cute. I want to do triple XXX, triple X. The two women's faces turned pure red, and soon they turned their faces to the side. Victor didn't understand their reaction. Sasha was curious. She focused on the connection she had with Victor and saw his thoughts. Cute. She didn't understand why Violet and Ruby were reacting like that. What are you doing? Pepper asked curiously. She was looking at her sister, who had a red face and was acting suspiciously. And nothing. Ruby stuttered a little. Fun. Pepper glared at her younger sister. What? Are you practicing dual cultivation here? Lakis and Ruby's faces turned pure red. Dual cultivation? Victor, Violet, and Sasha were confused. Somehow Ruby and Lakis sighed in relief when they realized they were the only ones who understood. Pepper, stop talking nonsense. Ruby spoke. I'm sorry, but you blushed, and you were acting weird, I thought. Stop. Okay, we understand. Lakis closes Pepper's mouth. Mmm. Pepper tried to say something, but only strange sounds came out of her mouth. Don't let her say anything, Ruby ordered. I know. Lakis spoke. Enough, Sienna said, trying to bring order to the situation. She looks at her mother. What is it, Sienna? I was having fun, Scathack said. For her, a bored person, watching her daughters play with her son-in-law was something nice. Mother, why did Lady Victoria declare war? Sienna asked in a serious tone. Hearing the familiar name, Sasha reacted. Aunt? What is my aunt doing? Oh, she proposed a game with Clan Horsemen to regain Clan Fulger's lost count title, Scathack replied. What? Sasha was shocked. She never thought that selfish, narcissistic, proud aunt would do something like that. She's pretty sure her aunt isn't doing it to help her clan. The Horseman clan accepted? What were the bet this time? Sienna asked. Horseman clan? I've never heard of this clan, Violet questioned. I want to know too, Victor said. Oh, I'll let you two in on the subject. Ruby started to explain to Violet and Victor who Clan Horseman was. Victoria just wants the title of Vampire Count, and she staked all her riches. Sienna was speechless. Is she crazy? Her equity is absurd. It's more than $3 trillion counting on illegal and legal businesses. Why would she give it up for just one title? Sasha spoke. Pepper and Lakis, realizing that the conversation was becoming boring, decided to close their eyes and go to sleep. They were too lazy to think about it. You don't know why since you're just a member of the clan, but the title of Vampire Count is very important, Sienna said, and Scathack nodded in agreement. What do you mean? Sorry, I can't say. Only the leaders of the clan holding the title of Count can know this information. Sasha frowned. Then she looked to Scathack for answers. Don't look at me, brat, she said and continued. This is something that even I can't talk about. Tisk, Sasha doesn't like it. She looks at Sienna. And how do you know that? Oh, it's because I took on Count's duties in my mother's place. Is this allowed? If the king approved, then yes, it's allowed. Sienna smiled. Sasha frowned in annoyance when she saw Sienna's smile. For some reason, she didn't like that smile. I see. Victor spoke when he finished listening to Ruby's entire explanation about the Clan Horsemen. Why didn't my mom tell me about this? This is an important issue. Violet asked herself. You probably left the house and didn't even want to talk to her, right? Ruby spoke. Violet was silent. She knew Ruby was right. Scathack, tell me the situation of Sasha's family. You should know more about it, right? Victor said in an unnaturally serious tone. Oh? What will you do if you know? Scathack smiled. All the women looked at Victor, waiting for his answer. Even Pepper and Lakis, who decided to sleep, were a little interested in Victor's answer. It depends on the situation, Victor started to speak. If Sasha is being owned by someone else because of a stupid bet made by her idiot mother. He looks at Sasha. Sorry for the offense to my mother-in-law. It's okay. She's a fucking idiot. Everyone knows that. Violet and Ruby were a little surprised to hear Sasha use such inappropriate words. Then, what will you do? Scat looked more interested than usual. Victor spoke in a definitive tone, as if it were an absolute truth. Training, getting stronger, and no matter how long it takes, I will slaughter that entire clan. Nobody touches my wives and gets away with it. Scat smile grew. She seemed to like the answer. Victor, Sasha smiled. Maybe I'll make my mom lose a bet too. Violet said. She got jealous. Slap. Ruby hits Violet on the head. Ouch. Violet holds her head in pain. What are you doing, bitch? Stop talking nonsense. Didn't you realize that when he said wives, he included us too? Oh. Violet opened her mouth. And what are you going to do if Sasha doesn't belong to anyone and her family just lost the count title? Sienna asked a little curiously. Victor looks at Sienna and replies in a disinterested tone. I won't do anything. Huh. Sienna and Sasha spoke in unison. Sasha is fine, and for me, that's what matters. Now, if she wants to get that stupid title back, I'll support her, and if she wants my help, I'll help her, but other than that, I won't intervene. It's not like since she's lost the title of Count Vampire, she would be poor. Stupid title. Sienna was trying not to strangle this man. You believe in your wives a lot, Scat said in a neutral tone. Victor looks at Scat and displays a gentle smile. If I don't believe my wife, who will? I always believed in them. From the beginning, he spoke with absolute confidence in what he was saying. I see. She displayed a small smile on her face. Victor! Sasha suddenly hugged Victor. He didn't understand, but he didn't deny her embrace. Feeling small tears on his shirt, he was a little shaken. What's it? What happened? Nothing. She spoke, sobbing a little. Just let me stay like this for a moment. She didn't know what she was feeling, but hearing Victor's confident words somehow, she remembered talking to Julia. When did I get so emotional? I was not like that. Omo. You can hug me all you want, he chuckled. Then he started stroking her head. Unfair. This bitch. Violet suddenly had her mouth covered by Ruby's hands. Read the mood, damn it. Ruby spoke in a low voice. HMHMH. She tried to say something, but Ruby didn't understand. Satisfied? Now. Explain it to me, Victor said, looking at Scat. Brat. You must have more. Sienna was going to say something. She was already annoyed to see Victor treating her mother so casually. Victor looked at Sienna as his eyes glowed pure red. Shut up. You are annoying. Sienna felt her body tremble. She tried to say something, but her mouth couldn't move. She couldn't move her body. Yes, I will be quiet, she spoke in a monotone. Good. He nodded with satisfaction. Finally, she was silent. He thought. Oh. Scat looked at it curiously. She remembers seeing it in the past. Kagaya also remembered a similar situation that happened to her. That again, doesn't he realize what he just did? She thought when she saw Sienna's reaction. Violet's violet eyes sparkled a little when she saw Sienna's reaction. She remembers that something happened in the past with the two budding hunters. Big sister? Why are you standing like a robot? Pepper asked curiously. She pinched Sienna's cheek, but the older sister wasn't moving. Lakis, who saw everything that happened, just looked on with eyes shining with curiosity. Scat looks at Victor and says, Sasha's situation is exactly the second situation. She totally ignored her daughter's condition. Oh. The Horseman clan requested a game with Sasha's mother, and the bet was the title of Count Vampire. She explained, and then added, the Horseman clan was betting on something very unique. Something that even a vampire who's lived over 1900 years and is bored as fuck would be curious enough to bet the Count title for. She puts on a face of disgust. They were betting a hybrid. The whole room was silent the moment they heard what she said. Lucy's underground base. It's a success. Lucy smiled satisfied. He was looking at an open white coffin with the symbol of the Black Cross. And on the floor were several red magic symbols. The symbols seemed to have been made with blood. Yes, all we have to do now is fill the coffin with the blood of the innocents and noble vampires. If everything goes as we planned, we will become noble vampires. Indeed, Lucy nods with satisfaction, spending almost his entire fortune to hire a corrupt which seems to have been worth it. What did you do with the sacred artifact? That one spear seemed to be quite strong, Karen asked. I threw it in the trash, Lucy replied. Karen was speechless. She even thought she had gone deaf for a few seconds. What did you do with the sacred artifact? She decided to ask again. I threw it in the trash, Lucy replied. Lucy looked at Karen, and when he saw her expression of disbelief, he explained, the only ones who can use these artifacts are the hunters. If I sell them to the witches, those whores will sell information from me to the hunters, so the artifact was useless, and I threw it in the trash. Couldn't you keep the artifact or something? Keep? Where? He asked. Karen couldn't answer. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. And I'm also not a fool who would keep a deadly weapon that I can't even use in my house. Lucy snorted. Because of that, I threw it in the trash. Makes sense. Karen didn't find arguments to refute Lucy's decision, and the spear had an ancient look. In fact, the item didn't even have the appearance of a weapon. It looked like white wood in the shape of a spear. Where did you throw the spear? In Violet's territory. Somehow Karen had a bad feeling about this. Couldn't you throw it somewhere else? At sea or something? The hunters would retrieve the spear if I did that. They somehow managed to track that object. You remember, right? Every time we would go somewhere, there were hunters waiting like they knew where we were going. Yes, if it weren't for that corrupt witch, we'd be lost. See? As the witch's spell ran out, I threw the spear into Violet's territory. If the hunters find the spear, they will automatically link the incident to Clan Snow. Karen started to think, and after a few seconds, she said, I think you made a stupid decision. Did you forget they know you stole the artifact? Lucy opened his eyes. Then he said, Of course I didn't forget. But they don't know who I was working for. Is your brain melting? Hunters aren't dumb. They can hate vampires and blame all the shit they do to us. But that's just dumb. First, you stole the artifact and they know that. Everyone knows that. Second, that princess of Clan Snow has already met the hunters, and they must know she doesn't have the artifact. Third, did you see the Vatican incident? That was probably retaliation from that crazy bitch. Some stupid hunter must have hurt her daughter. The hunters must know that the 3 noble clans that were in that incident are not involved in this theft. Come on, what would a count vampire who is over 1,500 years old want with an artifact like that? They are basically useless to them after all, like you said. Only hunters can use that weapon. Realizing the important point she made, Lucy said, A Karen with a brain. This is new. Karen's face distorted into anger. Okay. Lucy backed off. I'm going to retrieve the spear, and I'm going to throw it further away, okay? He said. He would never admit that he didn't think deeply about it. Lucy was so excited about his plan working that he totally forgot about that detail. Throw the artifact as far away as possible, preferably under the sea or something. Karen suggested and adds with a serious look, Don't fuck with us now. We're almost close to completing what we've wanted for so many centuries. Okay. Lucy picks up the phone and dials a number. Then he puts it in his ear. Johnny, I have a job for you. Hybrids? Victor asked in curiosity. Hearing that word, he remembered the movies he watched with his father. It was about a female vampire who wore a black tights outfit and had a hybrid boyfriend. He remembers that hybrids in fiction are often portrayed as the best of both races, and they are very strong. Sienna, Violet, Sasha, and Ruby's faces practically changed to disgust when they heard the word. Lakis and Pepper don't seem to care much. Yes, disgusting creatures that are the result of crossing a noble vampire and a werewolf. Victor looked around and saw the reaction that this word caused his wives. His curiosity increased. Are hybrids strong? That was his first curiosity. Hybrids strong? Sienna started to laugh. She looked like she managed to regain control of her body. Sienna wanted to irritate Victor as a form of revenge for what happened, but when she felt the gaze of Scat Hack, Ruby, Violet, and Sasha, she closed her mouth. She only cared about her mother and Ruby. Why is my mom on his side now? She thought. Victor looked at Sienna with annoyed eyes. That bitch hadn't shut up? Darling, unlike movies, hybrids aren't strong. They're like an error in the genetic code. There's something like a donkey. Oh. Victor looked at Ruby. Ruby continued, werewolves and vampires are two very different species genetically and physiologically from each other. To put it in simple words, we are the opposite of each other. Because of that quirk, we can't mix. And when we get mixed up, an extremely rare case can happen. A hybrid can be born. Violet spoke in disgust, just imagining that a vampire slept with a wolf. Her body shuddered in disgust. She even felt like throwing up. As we are very different species from each other, the hybrid will be born with various genetic problems. Sasha continued, they will be sterile, and they will have a short life expectancy. Sometimes they are born with unusual diseases that can affect the two species. Because of that, when a hybrid is identified, it is immediately hunted and eliminated by the two races. I see. Victor placed a hand on his chin. I wonder what the Horseman clan was thinking about protecting a hybrid. Don't they know they can cause a pandemic at any time? What are the royal guards doing? Those old eunuchs wouldn't allow that kind of monstrosity to run around. Violet was surprisingly more involved in the conversation. They're quiet, surprisingly quiet. Sienna spoke. Those old people who keep talking about how the past was 1,000 flowers? Ruby asked. Then she frowned. Do the king's guards have some sort of agreement with that clan? That's not possible. The royal guards are just a kind of police to keep everything in order. They only follow the orders of the royal family. Sasha spoke. Then she opened her eyes. Oh, looks like you understand. Scat Hack exhibited a small smile. Someone from the royal family is supporting that clan. Sasha spoke with disgust. She started to think of the princes and princesses of the king, but only one came to mind when she thought of this kind of dirty scheme. The first prince? She said. Probably, I'm not sure yet, but that's something he would do. He doesn't hide his intentions of desire about the throne much. Scat Hack spoke in disinterest. She doesn't like political schemes. She prefers to solve everything by force, though she knows that not everything can be resolved that way, especially delicate situations involving the royal family. As she knows she doesn't have the patience for this kind of political bullshit, she avoids getting too involved in politics. After all, she knows that at some point, she's going to get angry, and she's going to end up destroying another clan of noble vampires. I don't understand something. Victor spoke doubtfully. Scat Hack looked at Victor. Are hybrids so rare that they might attract my mother-in-law's curiosity? Lakis and Pepper were somehow surprised that Victor could speak the word mother-in-law so easily. It was as if he hadn't even insulted the woman a few moments ago. Yes, they're very rare, and there are a lot of stories about hybrids. Most of those stories are as bad as you've just heard, but some of those stories have been twisted to think that hybrid blood is something delicious. Scat Hack nearly threw up. You seem to have your own experience about it, Victor commented. In the past, I found a hybrid and drank its blood. That was one of the things I regret the most in this life. I felt like I was eating garbage. It's disgusting. Lakis, Ruby, and Pepper didn't know how to react to this new information. But one thing was going through the sisters' minds. Why did their mother always reveal pieces of her past so easily when Victor asked something? When her own daughters ask a question, she always avoids answering something. My mom was basically fooled by the hybrid stories. And because she was bored, she didn't think twice about betting the vampire count title. And in the end, she lost. Sasha got angry, and she started to speak. That dumb blonde! The dumb blonde stereotype must have been invented by her. Victor didn't know how to react to Sasha's words. In the end, he just patted her head. Seeing that Sasha started to become visibly calmer, he said, So my mother-in-law was tricked. What a surprise. He rolled his eyes. Then he felt a foreboding. Why am I feeling this is going to become common in the future? Everyone feels that when they hear about that woman. Sasha rolled her eyes. Victor was silent again. If Mom got the invitation, then was our clan invited to see the game? Ruby decided to ask something she was curious about. Indeed. I wasn't planning on going at first, but the situation has changed. She looked at Victor with a small smile on her face. Feeling her stare, he looked at Scat Hack confused. Seeing their mother's look, the sisters just visibly sighed. They could clearly understand that she accepted the invitation just for Victor to see how the game works. Their mother's interest in Victor is reaching the point of no return. She's even changing her habits just to give Victor more experience in the vampire world. When will the game take place? Sasha asked. In 6 months, Sienna replied in Scathacker's place. Why so long? Probably because Clan Horseman wants to prepare. Sienna takes the card that was on the table and throws it towards Sasha. Before Sasha can take the card, Violet puts her hand in front of her and takes the card. Sasha looked at Violet with neutral eyes. Humph! Violet snorted. Then she opened the letter. Blah blah, political bullshit, blah blah. She started to read. Everyone rolled their eyes, except Victor, who smiled kindly and patted Violet's head. Violet displayed a satisfied smile. Oh, are all clans with the title count invited? That bitch is confident of winning. Huh. Well, it's my aunt. Unlike my mom, she never lost a bet. Because of that, she built a big, noble clan practically in less than 500 years, Sasha said. Question. Pepper held up her hand. Feeling the stares of everyone in the room, Pepper asked cutely, what are we going to do about Victor's powers? Ruby opened her eyes a little. Oh, you're right, sister. If they find out he's a vampire who has the 3 powers of the count houses, trouble could ensue. So, are we going to seal his powers? Lakis suggested. Hell no. If it's problems they want, they will have them. I won't limit myself or hide my powers just because I'm afraid of problems. Hell no. If it's trouble they want, they're very welcome to look for trouble. Victor and Scathach spoke in unison as the two wore a predatory smile. Everyone was speechless when they heard their words. They spoke differently, but the essence was the same. Do they want trouble? Then problems they will have. They even looked excited. Scathach and Victor looked at each other. Scathach was visibly a little shocked by what she just heard, but soon her smile just grew and grew. Oh fuck. Ruby, Sienna, and Lakis realized it was too late to make Scathach lose interest in Victor. Violet hugged Victor and looked at Scathach with possessive eyes. What are you smiling at? Old hag shoo-shoo, he's mine. Brat, you're looking forward to my punishment. Huh? Scathach displayed her fist. Humph, he's mine. Go find another man. Violet didn't flinch. She hugged Victor tighter. Scathach's blood-red eyes increased in intensity for a few seconds, but stopped as soon as Victor said something. My wife is so adorable. He pulled Violet and hugged her. Then he started stroking her head. Stop. I'm serious. Violet spoke in a serious tone, and Victor's smile only widened. Omo, I know, he kissed her cheek. Violet's face turned a little red, but she didn't deny Victor's advances. I've decided something. Scathach suddenly spoke up. Everyone looked at the red-haired woman. Then she flashes a small smile at the others. I will start training Victor from today. Suddenly Scathach disappears and appears in front of Victor. Not that again. Victor instinctively jumped back. You're still too slow to avoid me. Scathach appeared behind him and lightly attacked his neck, but a small block of ice stopped her hand on Victor's neck. Victor covers his body in lightning and kicks Scathach towards her face. Every time he made these moves, he had a big smile on his face. Oh, you have good instincts. I like it. She grabs Victor's leg. The lightning striking the ground was heard all around, and even the pressure of the wind made a hole in the wall behind Scathach. It just shows how much force Victor put in his attack. But it's still not enough. She decided to put on more strength. She squeezed Victor's foot tighter and pulled towards her. Crack! Victor grits his teeth and tries not to react to his foot being broken by Scathach's grip. N/O/vel/B//and.C//om. He placed an ice shield on his stomach, but this time, Scathach easily passed through the ice as he felt the punch connect with his stomach. Cough! Realizing he was losing consciousness, he quickly bit down on his tongue. As soon as he felt his consciousness return, he quickly kicked the ground and backed away from Scathach. Ha 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 ha. Scathach started laughing when he saw Victor's reaction. She seemed to be enjoying herself. She lets go of Victor's leg and allows him to step away. Darling, husband. Victor raises his hands to his wives in a stop gesture, and he looks at Scathach with a big bloody grin on his face. You don't have to do this to try to get me to go with you. I'll gladly follow you. I told you, right? I won't run away from you, Scat Hack's body visibly trembled. Her cheeks turned a little red, and her smile grew. Good, good. That's the spirit I want. Follow me. As soon as she disappeared, Victor used his eyes and continued to keep his senses focused on Scat Hack. And he said without turning around, I'll train. Lakis, Sienna, and Ruby are just speechless. As Scat Hack alumni, they know it's not easy to do what Victor has done now. He suddenly turned to Sasha. Don't do anything reckless, okay? I won't. Don't worry, husband, Sasha said with a small smile. You too, Violet. Huh? But I never do anything reckless. Violet felt a little sad to be parted from Victor. Everyone in the room rolled their eyes. Victor walked up to Ruby, and he patted her head. Take care of them, okay? I trust you. Victor displays a gentle smile. Then he disappears. The three wives clenched their fists tightly. Fway, where is Kagaya? Pepper asked as she looked around. She was sure Kagaya was beside Maria, but suddenly Kagaya disappeared, and as a maid wouldn't leave without the master's permission, she thought it was weird. The three wives were speechless, but soon they exhibited a small smile. As expected of her, they spoke in unison. Huh? What do you mean? Pepper asked. Nothing. The three spoke in unison. A moment of silence descends into the room. Then Violet opens her mouth. I'll go back home? Heh. Ruby and Sasha were surprised. What's it? Violet was upset. Nothing. It's just a surprise you want to part with Victor, Ruby commented. Indeed. I thought you were going to scream in rage or something, Sasha added. Believe me, I don't want to part with him, and I'm really angry too. Violet's eyes went completely dark. But as long as that old witch is with Victor, I probably can't find him. Somehow, I'm jealous of Kagaya now. She can be with Darling all the time as if she were his shadow. Ruby and Sasha nodded in agreement with Violet's words. I'm going back home, and I'm going to train. I feel my power steadily increasing, and I don't have the confidence to control it like before. Sienna, Lakis, and Pepper were a little surprised when they heard what Violet said. They know that for vampires to get stronger, they have to get older or train to learn new techniques and incorporate them into their fighting style. However, Violet just said that her power was steadily growing. That's theoretically impossible for vampires. Violet's powers shouldn't have a power-boosting spurt until she's 500 years old. Oh, now that you mention it, I felt it in me too, but I ignored it because I can control it perfectly, Ruby said. Sasha looks at Ruby with a neutral expression. That's because you're a small monster trained by an even bigger monster. Ruby was a little annoyed. How rude to call me a monster. But that's what you are. You've been trained by Scat Hack since you were little. You're a little monster. Sasha smiled. Ruby turns to face Violet and ignores Sasha. How are you going to get home? We are in the north, you know. It's a long trip to the Southern Territory, which is where you live. I will run with the power of my fire. I can boost myself to get back faster, Violet spoke. This is stupid. That is just a waste of energy. Ruby said, why don't you use an airplane or something? It's easier. It's too slow. Ruby couldn't deny it's slow, but it's better than wasting energy. Why don't you call that maid? Speaking of the devil, where is she? Sasha looked around, but couldn't find Natalia. She said she's on vacation until Violet goes back to the human world, Luna said. Explain? Ruby looked at Violet. That maid's contract is only for life in the human world. That's all I can say. Violet spoke neutrally. Sigh. What is your family thinking of getting involved with that clan? Ruby sighed. Although my mother is a narcissistic bitch, she still has a good head on her shoulders. She got a deal with the king to employ someone from that clan as a maid. Why did she risk so much? Sasha asked. She wanted to shop in the human world easier. Sasha looked at Violet sympathetically. She put her hand on her shoulder. It's hard to have a mother like that, right? Yes. Violet sighed. Ruby didn't say anything. Despite Scat Hack being the way she is, she was still a good mother. At the limit of the possible, of course. She was strict, kind, and never let her crazy things affect her daughters. She was also very overprotective of her daughters. And she was always there when her daughters needed her. Overall, Ruby had nothing to complain about her mom. She just had trouble getting close to her mom. She always seemed so far away. Because of that, she feels a little envious of Victor, who managed to bond with Scat Hack very easily. And that's a thought that is shared by all three of Ruby's sisters. What are you two going to do? Sienna asked Ruby and Sasha, and then she got up from the table along with Lakis and Pepper. I'll train too, although I don't think I need it. It's always good to go over the basics, Ruby said. Me too, unlike these two freaks, I'm not a genius, Sasha said. Ruby and Violet rolled their eyes. Train and use the Count Vampire transformation even for a little while. If that's not being a genius, I wonder what his Ruby thought. Not even Ruby could access the Count Vampire form yet, and Sasha and Violet could already do that. Although different from the two women, Ruby had two elements that were essentially the same element. Ruby's ice and water were much more challenging to train than Sasha's lightning bolt and Violet's fire. And you too? Sienna asked Pepper and Lakis. I'm going to watch anime. I saw that a new season was out. Pepper chuckled silly. Ruby reacted to Pepper's words. Tell me a little more about this, she said. Of course. Sienna sighed and looked at her middle sister. I'll go to sleep, she smiled. Then she disappeared. Well, I'll go back to my job. I predict my mom will be confined for 6 months with that man. Sienna smirked. Then she spoke in a shocked voice. Wait, this isn't a bad thing for you guys? After all, you saw what happened, right? I wonder what will happen if my mom is alone with that one for 6 months. The eyes of the three wives began to glow, and a suffocating pressure began to leave their bodies. Hi. Pepper, who was close to Ruby, quickly fled and got behind her older sister. Forget what I said. I'll get my darling. Violet quickly changed her mind. Indeed, Ruby said in a cold tone. It's dangerous to leave that woman alone with Victor. The three look at each other and then nod to themselves. Then they disappear, leaving traces of their respective powers. Ha 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 ha, Sienna laughed. She finally got a little revenge. She was also very petty like Victor. Big sister, Pepper whispered. She looked at Pepper. Our mom isn't going to like this. And if she finds out it was you who came up with the idea? Well, Pepper couldn't finish the sentence. She just looked sad. Oh fuck, Sienna's face darkened. She felt that every time she tried to provoke Victor, she was digging her own grave. Inside a coliseum, Victor and Scat Hack were in the center of the arena looking at each other. At some point, as Victor ran after Scat Hack, the red-haired woman disappeared in front of him and came back wearing a tight-fitting outfit that clung perfectly to her body. The outfit was black with golden and red details. At first glance, it looked like a tight full-length bodysuit, but looking closer, he realized it was something like a battle suit. To be honest with himself, Victor was having a hard time looking at Scat Hack. That voluptuous body was just too unfair. And since she looked like a more mature version of Ruby, who was his wife, the temptation was much greater. But despite feeling it, he kept a poker face with a slight smile on his face. He didn't want to be rude. His mother always said not to stare at women's bodies too much. After all, they felt the eyes of men. He still remembers her words. Look once, observe, appreciate, and commit the image to memory. Don't be staring at the woman like a weirdo. Scat Hack flashes a small smile when she sees Victor's gaze, and her smile grows even wider when he keeps a poker face and doesn't stare at her body like a dog in heat. She nods contentedly, like a woman who considers herself old-fashioned. She quite appreciated Victor's attitude. First of all, we should start training your resistance to pain. A small ice stake appears in front of Scat Hack. Don't dodge. You can take it easily, right? She said. Soon she throws the stake into Victor's heart. Realizing the stake will pierce his heart, Victor grits his teeth and doesn't move. Soon the ice stake pierced his heart, and he felt pain throughout his body. He felt like screaming, but he gritted his teeth harder and resisted. N/O/vel/B//in.C//om. Good, Scat Hack complimented. As expected, you didn't disappoint me. Victor takes the ice stake that pierced his heart and pulls the stake out. His body was shaking, and it was visible that he was hurting, but he didn't scream. Something inside him wouldn't allow it. He'd rather die than demonstrate a pathetic action like screaming and acting like a little girl. Victor throws the stake into the ground. Scat Hack nodded in satisfaction once more as she began to explain. The vampire is a physically weak breed compared to werewolves, but in compensation, we have regeneration that is far superior to that of wolves, and in combat we get hurt a lot. Because of that, we must train resistance to pain. As she was satisfied with Victor's previous action, she demonstrated with actions what she meant. Scat Hack shows her right hand. Then her hand hardens and becomes sharp. She extends her left arm and suddenly cuts it. Blood fell to the ground, and yet the smile never left Scat Hack's face, and she never stopped looking at Victor. Her arm fell to the ground, and in less than a few seconds, her arm disappeared from the ground and appeared in her hand again. In less than 1 second, her arm has completely regenerated. Victor was surprised by this demonstration. He touched his heart, and at some point, he could feel that his heart had already healed. See? In time, you will be able to do this. Pain resistance, that's what we're going to train first. And that skill is the most important for our fighting style. Okay, Victor spoke in a neutral tone as he began to undress. Oh, aren't you going to ask why we shouldn't train with weapons or powers, etc.? She spoke of the complaints her students always made. He stops undressing and looks at her. He replied in a neutral tone, "You are the master here. I just have to follow what you order me to do." She didn't expect this answer. And he smiled a little. "I trust you. I know you won't make me do something useless. After all, just like me, you want me to get stronger quickly, right?" When he finished speaking, he started to undress again. Scat Hack's smile slowly grew distorted. Her eyes were glowing blood red, and her teeth changed and sharpened, and an immense pressure of murderous intent left her body. The birds around the Colosseum started to flee in fear. They feared for their life. They could feel that a predator had arrived, and this feeling was felt by all the animals that were around. Victor's shadow began to shake violently, and soon the shadow seemed to leave his body and fled out of the Colosseum. As expected, I can't contain myself anymore. She put both hands on her face, her cheeks turned red, and her breathing became ragged. She loved the answer he gave her. "I don't want anyone in the way." Her killing intent grew bigger and formed a dome around the Colosseum. "For 6 months, I will cut this diamond any way I want." Somehow she felt her private parts a little wet. What is this? Violet fell to the ground while breathing quickly. She was very terrified. "Tis's mother." Ruby was leaning against the tree as she stared at the Colosseum that had turned into a dome of murderous intent. What happened? Is she angry? Sasha asked as she held her trembling arms. "Oh, let's step back a bit." "Why, yeah." Sasha nods and then leaves the Colosseum area. Seeing that Violet was unable to move, she seemed more affected since she was closer to the Colosseum when the explosion of murderous intent took place. "Sasha," Ruby said. Sasha turns and looks at Violet. She bites her lip, resists her fear, and covers her body in lightning. Then she appears beside Violet. "Let's go." Why, yes, Violet didn't refuse. She was too numb. She had never felt this feeling before in her life. Was I teasing this monster all along? Only now did she understand why Scat Hack was called the strongest female vampire in the world. At a considerable distance from the Colosseum, the 3 wives were on top of a mountain. "What in the 7 hells is this?" Sasha asked. She was looking at a black dome. She could feel all the negative feelings in that dome. Instinctively, she knew that if she approached that place, she would be killed. "That's my mother's killing intent," Ruby commented in disbelief. She had seen her mother's killing intent before, but it was nothing like what she saw now. "Just how many beings has she killed?" Sasha can't help but ask. "Just how many? How many lives do you have to take to have such frightening pressure?" "I don't know, but she participated in all the wars she found interesting. With just those wars, you can imagine the huge number of beings she killed," Ruby added. Suddenly, Violet's shadow begins to tremble, and then it leaves the ground as Kagaya coughs. "Kagaya?" The 3 women spoke. "What happened?" Violet asked. "I got kicked out. I couldn't stand it. I felt like I would die if I stayed in that place." "I'm sorry, Lady Violet." "And Darling? What happened to him?" Violet started to shake Kagaya, who was trying to recover. "Calm down, Violet," Sasha spoke. She took Violet's hands. Violet glared at Sasha. My mom won't kill Victor. Remember she took him to that place to train? She probably doesn't want to be interrupted, Ruby added. Violet sighs, and she says, I'm sorry, Kagaya. Can you tell us what happened to make Scat act like that? Ruby and Sasha were a little surprised that Violet could listen to them so easily. Kagaya nods, and soon she starts to explain. Some minutes later. So it's Darling's fault? Violet didn't know how to react. I don't think so, Ruby said. She was the one who understood a little more about Scat. All her students always complained about her training. Even I was like that. But Victor is different, and he seemed to be willing to accept whatever my mother threw at him. That must have been the trigger that made her act that way. Ruby finished the explanation. She was always obsessed with being stronger and training. And my husband is a lot like her. Sasha spoke. Violet bites her lip, just thinking that Victor is going to be stuck with Scat for 6 months. Her body trembles with jealousy and rage. Don't think about it, Ruby warned her. Huh. Violet didn't understand. I can read your superficial thoughts. Have you forgotten? But I don't even need to read your thoughts to understand what's going through your head right now. So again, I repeat, don't think about it, or jealousy will consume you. My mom isn't interested in relationships. She's just excited that she's found a potential disciple for her to train any way she wants. Violet bites her lip. Are you 100% sure she's not interested in a relationship? Sasha asked. Ruby was silent. Realizing that Ruby didn't respond, the two women became more concerned. Honestly, Ruby didn't know. Her mom never talked about it, and she never saw her mom get in touch with anyone either. One time, 14-year-old Ruby asked her mother that had received a marriage proposal from a clan. Mother, why don't you get married and hook up with someone? She asked her mother, who was on top of the wreckage of the clan that the man who sent her the marriage proposal was from. Scat exhibited a face of disgust. I'm not interested in trash. These men are just unworthy of my attention. They're just pigs to be slaughtered by me. The vampire's entire body is covered in ice until it becomes a statue. Ruby looked at it with cold eyes and asked, So which man is worthy of you? I do not know. Ruby was speechless. Scat looked at her daughter and showed a small smile. But I'll know when I meet this man in person. My instincts are always correct. Then I'll wait patiently for the day I have a father, Ruby said coldly, but her mother could see the sarcastic tone in her daughter's words. Kaka. That day will probably never come. My standards are too high and almost impossible to meet, she laughed. Then she jumped towards the street and started walking towards her mansion. After finishing removing all of his clothes and leaving only a pair of boxers, Victor looked at Scat. He didn't seem to have noticed the killing intent that was coming out of Scat. I finished. What now? Honestly, he was wondering why he should just wear his underwear, but that thought died the moment it was born. After all, he wasn't ashamed of his current body. Scat puts her hand on her chin as if thinking about something. She looks at Victor's body in curiosity. Then, she approaches Victor and touches her fingers to his body. Seeing the firm, well-defined muscles, her eyes gleam a little. She seems to have come to some conclusion. Interesting, looks like you'll take whatever I throw at you. Suddenly, she reaches in her pocket and pulls out a small, old-fashioned cell phone. Well, Victor was going to say something, but he suddenly felt his body being pierced. He spits blood on the floor. He looks down and sees Scat his hands across his stomach. Hold on, she spoke in a neutral tone, and then she started to churn Victor's stomach like she was looking for something. Victor gritted his teeth. His body trembled in pain, but he just clenched his fists tightly and held on. Scat removed her hand from his stomach, and the moment she did, he felt something pulled out of his stomach. That's He almost felt at his knees on the floor, but the moment that sensation came, he quickly stomped harder on the floor and stood up, his pride not allowing him to kneel. Your gut, she flashed an innocent smile. Victor was speechless. A few seconds later, something started to happen. Victor's intestines that were in Scat hand dissolved into blood and then disappeared. And at the same moment that happened, Victor felt something return to his stomach. He touches his belly region. He doesn't feel pain anymore, and the cut on his stomach has also been restored. Even the blood he spat has disappeared. Impressive. She smiled contentedly as she looked at her cell phone. In less than 10 seconds, you had your whole stomach restored. Is this normal? Victor asked in curiosity. Of course it isn't. She put away her cell phone and began to explain. For an ordinary noble vampire, it takes between 30 seconds to 1 minute to regenerate this type of damage. For a noble vampire descended from a Count clan, it takes around 30 to 40 seconds depending on the individual's potential. This kind of regeneration is only seen in the children of the royal family. For example, the youngest daughter of the king, she is a newborn, and her regeneration is around 10 to 15 seconds. N/O/vel/ B// and C//om. You seem to know a lot about this. Of course I know. All the king's children that are born, I want to check whether they had potential or not personally. By potential, she probably meant beat up every one of them. Huh? Victor thought. They all have good talent, but unfortunately, they are useless. The mentalities of them are not like me. Because of that, though they have great talent, I never took any of them to train personally, she said with annoyance. Victor didn't know how to react to this. After all, he never saw the king's heirs personally, and if Scat judged them as unworthy, he simply lost interest in them. He considers Scat too much like him, and because of that, he strangely trusts her judgment a lot. Scat exhibited a small smile. You are indeed an anomaly. Your blood has made you special. It has strengthened all your bases. Even your body is stronger than a common vampire noble. Victor exhibited a small smile. If I'm an anomaly, what are you? In less than 1 second, your whole arm was restored. He compared himself a lot to Scat, which was absurd. She is a vampire who had 2,000 years to train, and he was just born. Follow me. Scat started walking towards the Colosseum wall. Victor followed Scat. As he was behind her, unconsciously, he looked at her ass that looked like she was trying to hypnotize him. Thick ass. This outfit is against the rules. Not that I'm complaining, but it's weird looking at your wife's mother like that. I think. He stared for only a few seconds, and then he looked away. He noticed how beautiful the Colosseum was, which was a lie. He was reviewing what he saw in his mind and comparing it to Ruby. Scat wins, although Ruby isn't far behind. Like mother, like daughter. Although, Sasha's legs are better. Apparently, he had plenty of free time to think about bullshit, and Scat noticed it too when she felt Victor's gaze on her ass. But she didn't care. She was feeling satisfied for some reason. Stopping at the Colosseum wall, Scat lightly touches the wall, and soon a new wall with various training weapons appears. Choose a weapon you like. She pointed like a saleswoman who was selling an item. Don't worry, all weapons are tough enough. They've been enchanted by witches. Victor looked at the weapons curiously. He saw that she had several weapons of all varied types, Eastern, Western, and even firearms. Victor didn't think too much. He wasn't experienced in using any weapons, so he just chose what he liked personally. He liked the spear and greatsword, but in the end, he chose greatsword. After all, he still has memories of watching a movie with his father about a barbarian who used a greatsword, and since that day, he has always been fascinated by the greatsword. He looked at the sharp blade of the sword with curious eyes. The greatsword was simply too big. He was currently 195 centimeters tall, and the sword blade was almost the same size as himself. Great sword, as expected of a man, I think. She laughed. I was in doubt about the spear and the great sword, but I just chose the one I liked best. He spoke while swinging the great sword with extreme ease. He even felt like the sword was made of paper. It was so light. Scat eyes sparkled a little when she heard that he liked the spear. Despite being a master of all weapons and having completely mastered them, the weapon she first practiced with was the spear. Since we have little time, your torture/training method is simple, a fight to a near-death state. She wasn't even hiding anymore that it would be torture for him, although Victor doesn't seem to mind. Victor looked at Scat, his smile growing disproportionately when he heard what she said. As vampires, we're going to abuse regeneration. Huh? Oh. You got it fast, she smiled and explained. Usually I would start by taking it easy. I would teach you the basics step by step, and I would apply a little torture to get you used to the pain, just like I did with my daughter. But She walks to the wall and picks up a spear. She makes some moves with the spear and points the sharp part of the spear at Victor. You woke me up, and now I want to have fun. Her smile grew distorted. Sharp teeth began to show on her face, and her eyes began to glow blood red. Just like Scat Hack, Victor's smile grew. Then, what are we waiting for? Let's start. He swings the great sword horizontally and attacks Scat Hack. Scat Hack uses the spear hilt and defended Victor's attack. The swing of the greatsword created a gust of wind, but despite all that strength, the spear didn't even move when receiving the attack. She then used the tip of the spear and pierced Victor's stomach. A small ice shield appears on Victor's stomach, but is easily pierced by Scat Hack's spear. Victor attacks again with the greatsword, but Scat Hack pulls the spear out of Victor's stomach and slashes his legs at inhuman speed. Ugh! Lots of useless moves. Try to simplify more. The way you use the power is correct, but... She waits for Victor's legs to regenerate, and when she saw that he had recovered, Scat Hack covers her legs with ice and kicks Victor in the stomach. You need to use the powers with more density. Your ice looks like glass that is easily broken. Try to make it more resistant. He flies backward, using his fire as a support. He manages to reposition himself in the air. Scat Hack runs towards Victor at moderate speed, and slowly her speed starts to increase. She covers the spear with ice and attacks the air. A wall of ice began to be created on the ground and headed towards Victor. What? Victor covers his arm with fire. Then he punches the air, and a blast of fire flew into the wall of ice. Boom! An explosion happens when ice and fire collide. Scat Hack appears at Victor's side. Bad decision. If you don't have experience fighting, limiting your field of vision is. She turns her head slightly and dodges the greatsword's blade. She looks at Victor and sees his eyes glowing red. Your eyes. They're special, huh? I didn't know that. I didn't say. Victor flashed a small smile. Oh, are you hiding more stuff from me? Who knows? How about you try to find out for yourself? Scat Hack's face turned a little red at Victor's response. She smiles sensually as she licks her lips. Don't worry soon. I'll know all about you. Hearing the noise of the explosion, the girls looked towards the Coliseum. They started, huh? Ruby spoke. What are we going to do? Sasha asked as she looked at the Coliseum. What we originally intended to do, train, Ruby replied, and soon she turned and started walking towards her mansion. I will go with you. I feel that if I train with you, I will get more results. Sasha spoke and started to follow Ruby. Like old times? Ruby smiled a little. Indeed, Sasha smiled. I want some tips on Count's transformation. I haven't been able to unlock mine yet, Ruby commented. I need to improve the basics, and I think you're really good at it. So we have a deal, Ruby chuckled. Sasha looked at Violet. What are you going to do? Violet bites her lip and clenches her fist in frustration. I'm going back home. Like I said before, I feel my power increasing, and I don't have the confidence to control power like before. I need to complete my training. She gets up off the ground and looks towards a place. n/o/vel/b//in.c//om. Ruby and Sasha seem to have gone deaf for a while. Excuse me, but what? Sasha practically screamed. What do you mean you didn't finish your training? Ruby asked in disbelief. Usually, vampires end their training at the age of 18, and after you turn 18 and finish training, you have to develop powers independently. That's how it happened to her and Sasha. Ruby trained from a young age in martial arts and how to control her powers with Scat Hack. Sasha just trained how to control her powers. After all, vampires are born knowing how to use their powers. They just don't know how to control them. Ruby's case is very rare in the vampire world as well. After all, vampire parents don't teach their children to use martial arts created by humans they consider to be cattle. Violet ignored Ruby's question. It's like Lady Violet said. Kaguya spoke when she realized that Violet was focused on something else. She spent many years watching Victor, and because of that, she didn't complete her training. And how did she manage to use the Count form if she didn't even train? Ruby asked. She remembers that in the past, Violet also used this power for a while. I don't know, Kaguya replied, but Lady Violet has always easily controlled her powers. Maybe that's the trigger? Ruby was silent. but inside she just wanted to scream. Bullshit. Kaguya, Violet spoke. Yes, Lady Violet? Kaguya looked at Violet. Violet looks at Kaguya, and soon her violet eyes turned blood red. I'm revoking your status as my maid. Kaguya didn't understand this sudden decision. Violet continues. As of today, you are my darling's personal maid. Kaguya's cold expression broke, and she just couldn't let go of the first word that popped into her mind. Night. Human world, current location somewhere around Brooklyn in a nightclub called the Lost Club. Bam! The sound of the club door opening suddenly was heard, and soon everyone could see a dark, muscular man standing 195 centimeters tall. He was wearing black pants with a simple white shirt, and around the man's neck was a necklace with a sharp thong that was very visible. He had short white hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a stern face. The man's body was covered in black striped tattoos, and he had several small scars strewn across his arms. Oh, you came back. How are you feeling now? A woman, who was leaning against the wall smoking, spoke as she looked at the man. The man exhibited a small smile that showed his white teeth, which were strangely a little sharper than usual. Then he started walking. I'm calmer. Just don't make a fuss again. The woman rolled her eyes. He walked past the woman as he spoke. Bitch, please. I never make a fuss. I am the most peaceful and hard-working man you will meet. The woman rolled her eyes again. Yeah. Then she ignored the man. The man walked down the halls to a door that had a tall man on guard. Johnny, you're forbidden dash, the guard spoke, but was stopped from continuing by a sudden movement of the muscular man. The muscular man puts his arm around the neck of the man who was on guard and pushed him to the wall. What did you say? He spoke with a smile that showed his sharp teeth. The guard was sweating all over his body. He could have sworn he pissed himself a little. The woman, who was a little farther away smoking, was just speechless. In less than a few seconds, the man known as Johnny already got into trouble. Nothing. You can pass, the guard spoke. Johnny steps away from the guard. You should have said that from the start. Soon he walks into the club, smelling alcohol, drugs, women, and sex. He flashes a satisfied smile. I'm home. The guard sighed in relief. He adjusts the suit he was wearing and touches the communicator in his ear and says, the mercenary is here. What? That motherfucker is banned. Why did you let him in? He heard a woman's voice. Madam, you know the man, if he doesn't come in, he will cause a fuss and destroy more property. You were just scared, right? The man used the right to remain silent. The woman sighed. I'll go talk to Judy, Jessica, Jinsei, probably Roberta too. Maybe some of these bitches can calm him down. The man was speechless. Just how many women has this man slept with? Then she yelled again. And do your job to keep people out. I'm paying you for this. Yes, ma'am. Realizing the comm had hung up, he whispered, I'll try. He could handle a normal human, but these freaks who came to this club, it was a big no for him. Oya. If it's not the legendary mercenary Johnny the White Wolf, I thought I'd never see you again. After all, you're banned from this club. A black-haired man wearing a bartender outfit spoke with exaggerated gestures. Your mood is still exaggerated as always, Eddie, Johnny told the man. What do you want, Mr. White Wolf? The usual, Johnny special. Eddie smiled. Then he asked, do you have money? Take it. Johnny takes out a large amount of money and throws it on the table. $30,000, that should pay half my debts. Now give me a drink. My throat is dry. Eddie's smile grew as he began to prepare Johnny's drink. Business seems to be going well. He started the conversation. You know how it is. People always need someone to clean up their mess. The client this time, I heard he was quite exotic. If by exotic, you mean a leech, yes. Eddie stopped preparing the drink for a while and said, just a piece of advice from a wolf friend who has been in this life for a long time. Don't get involved with the leech's problems. Things tend to get more complicated when they are involved. Soon, he went back to preparing the drink. When aren't things complicated? And you know how it is. Money is money. These bastards have lived so long their pockets are full of money, and they don't mind throwing that money away too easy. Indeed, they really are the best customers. You seem to know this man. Tell me a little about him. I'll continue if you pay your debt. TSK. Take it. He throws another amount of money. This should cover all my debts. Yes. until you decide to make another mess and get in debt again. Ha, I never caused a fuss. Eddie rolled his eyes and remained silent. Then he takes a glass and puts it on the table. Johnny's special, enjoy da. Johnny's eyes light up when he sees the drink. Then in a single sip, he drinks it all. Ah, ambrosia of the gods, he belched satisfied. Now, give me tequila. Yeah. The man takes a whole bottle of tequila and puts it on the table, and he fills Johnny's glass. And, as if it were water, Johnny drinks the whole glass again. Again, he puts the glass down on the table. Eddie refilled the glass. And again, Johnny drank it all. Again. This process was repeated for 20 doses. When Johnny finally felt satisfied, he asked, "And tell me about Lucy." "Oh, it's the usual commoner vampire with big dreams of becoming a noble vampire." "Oh, boring." "Continue." "He's kidnapping innocent men and women to do a ritual that will change his race. And he's working with a new noble clan house that I still don't have information about. Vampires using human sacrifices, nothing new." "Go on." Johnny drank another shot, and soon Eddie refilled his glass. Apparently, the leech's political power game that has never changed for 2,000 years is starting to change. Politics? Meh, boring. I heard your sister is in love with a newborn vampire. He spat all the tequila in Eddie's face. Disgusting, Eddie said as he wiped his face. WH-. What did you say? Your sister is in love with a newborn vampire, Eddie repeated as he wiped his face with a damp cloth. What kind of bullshit are you talking about? Even though he heard it again, he still couldn't believe it. My little sister would never fall in love with anyone. She's just a child. Johnny started to remember his sister. She was so little, and she kept screaming around. Big brother unconsciously. He smiled like a fool. Johnny, it's been 18 years. She's grown up. Eddie shattered his illusions. Johnny imagined his little sister, grown up and embraced by a random vampire. His face distorted in anger. I won't allow it. Bomb! He smacked the wood of the counter. I'll put it on your account, Eddie said with a small sigh. And your sister is already an adult. She can make her own decisions, and this passion won't last long. After all, vampires and wolves can't mix. Oh, what do you know? Spit it out, and give me more tequila. Johnny decided not to comment on what Eddie said. After all, he knows that Eddie's words were wrong. Wolves and vampires can relate. If the two individuals want, nothing can stop them. Only death, of course. You have money? Eddie smiled. Tisk, you're going to make me poor again, Johnny complained. Business is business. Friendship should not interfere with business. Whatever, just spill it. He took another amount of money and threw it on the table. Having already prepared this in advance, Eddie takes a document from under the counter. Name, Victor Walker. Age, 21 years old. Height, 175 cm. Weight, 50 kilograms. Personality, stupidly honest, vindictive, petty, loyal to the family. According to witnesses who live close to the individual, he is a nice guy that if you don't upset him, he won't mess with anyone. Warning, has tendencies towards sociopathy. Very jealous of those close to him. He has chances to become a Yandera like a certain pink-haired girl. What is this amazingly nice man? Johnny can't help but talk, and he remembers seeing him somewhere. And what is this ending? Yandera? Explain. Eddie puts his hand to his head as if he has a headache. That crazy woman, can't she make a correct report? Basically, Yandera means that a person has an unhealthy love for another and would be able to kill, usually out of jealousy or fear, any obstacle to being with that loved one. Isn't he a nice guy? Johnny said, after all, for wolves, this was normal. They were very territorial, and if anyone touched his women, he would do the same. Eddie was speechless. Kya! Hearing a familiar scream, Johnny turned his face and saw a blonde woman with blue eyes being held by a tall, bald man. Bitch, how dare you refuse me? I'm paying. Fuck you. This isn't a prostitution club. Grr. Johnny's face distorted. Sharp fangs appeared in his mouth. His face became more animalistic. His blue eyes glowed like neon blue. And then he stood up. I'll put it on your account, Eddie said. He already knew what was going to happen. Johnny ignored Eddie. So he grabs a chair next to him and throws it at the man. Bam! The chair hits the man's bald head and shatters. The man's face distorted in anger, and soon he screams like a roar. Who did that? Johnny. The woman spoke. Judy, step back. Why, yes. Judy quickly kicks the man's balls and runs. Bitch! The man roared. Where do you think you're going? Johnny appears in front of the man and holds his face. And then he throws him into the middle of the club. Whistles. Whistles. Several men started whistling and shouting, fight. 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 That man is fucked, a woman said, laughing. Of course he is. He touched Johnny's wife. That was expected to happen. The man beside the woman laughed. Hey, I'm not his wife. Judy complained. The man looks at Judy. Tell yourself that and keep believing it. But at the end of the day, you still go to his bed, right? Fuck off. Judy held up her middle finger. Judy, are you okay? A pale-skinned woman with slightly curly hair and dark blue eyes spoke in concern. Yes, I'm fine, Jessica. Judy smiled gently. Seeing the attitude of the customers who seemed to be enjoying themselves, Eddie's eyes sparkled a little. This is getting common now. Should I make a fight club? He could smell money when he thought of that idea. What the fuck is going on here? A woman looks at the center of the club and yells in frustration. That damn wolf again. Eddie looks to the side and sees a woman with short silver hair and a golden eye. She was wearing an eye patch covering half of her face, and she had a tired expression. She was wearing a stylish black suit, and she was smoking a black cigarette that looked like it was custom-made. Madam, Eddie, why didn't you stop that motherfucker dash? She started to complain again, but Eddie cut her off. Madam, I have a proposal for you. I guarantee you will make a lot of money. Oh, tell me more. The woman's tired. I seem to come back to life. Boom. Do you think you can demand something from her? Huh. In my territory. Know your place. Eddie and Madam look at Johnny, slamming the bald man's head to the ground. As expected, he didn't last long, disappointing. A woman spoke up in annoyance. Yeah, at least we made some money, a man next to her said, laughing. He's going to kill that man if he keeps this up. A woman with chocolate skin, sapphire blue eyes, and long straight white hair spoke worriedly. Jinsei, can you stop him, please? I don't want to have to clean up another body tonight. Madam spoke in annoyance. Yes, Jinsei closes her eyes for a few seconds. Then she opens her eyes. Her old blue sapphire eyes change to golden eyes with a reptilian-like slit. Johnny, you're back? Let's talk a little? Her seductive voice flew towards Johnny and visibly affected him. Johnny stopped hitting the man and looked at Jinsei. Soon, his predator's smile changed to a gentle smile. I missed you. He leaves the middle of the club and ignores the man who was in a half-dead state. He gets close to Jinsei and hugs her. Madam looks at a subordinate and gestures as if to clean up the mess. I missed you too. She spoke in a soft voice. Feeling Johnny squeezing her ass, she got annoyed. Stop it. Ha! He laughed a little and looks to the side. Oh, Jessica, you're back. Yes. She exhibited a gentle little smile, and then her expression changed to serious. We need to talk later. It's important. Okay. Johnny looks at Madam. I already paid my debts, so don't look at me like that, old hag. Madam looks at Eddie, and seeing her subordinate nod his head, she sighs. Just don't make trouble again, boy. But I never caused any problems. Everyone rolled their eyes. Johnny looks at Judy, and soon the atmosphere around him changes. Judy, he growled. Judy's body visibly shook. Were you working? Did I already mention that I don't allow it? Do I have to kill every man in this club so you don't work again? She swallows hard when she senses Johnny's mood. She was scared, but soon her face changes to an annoyed expression, and she growls at Johnny. I wasn't working. You know, since I stayed with you. Her face turned red. I don't work anymore. That man looked at me coming out of the second floor and started screaming, demanding services. Johnny smiled when he saw Judy's expression. You're too innocent sometimes for a former stripper dancer. Fuck off. She flipped her middle finger and turned her face away. Madam, that man must not come back here, he said with a serious face. He would never let a man live after talking like that to his wife. Sigh. I'll put it on your account, Madam said. She didn't want to get her hands dirty again today, but money is money. and she knows Johnny always pays his debts. How is your father's health? He asked Judy. Judy visibly softened. Thanks to the bite, he's as healthy as ever. He's in my pack now, but out of consideration for you, I won't force him to do anything. Johnny sat down on the bench and drank another shot of tequila. Thanks, Johnny. If it weren't for you, I'd still have to be working in that disgusting place. As a former stripper dancer, she went through many things that she prefers to forget about. If it weren't for her father's illness that needed a lot of money to treat, she would never have subjected herself to that kind of work. She hates her old profession. She knows and has many friends who had a similar situation like her. Women who needed money, and when they need it most, they had no support from anyone and somehow had to find the money. Pimps take advantage of these struggling women and make them prostitute themselves in exchange for scraps of money. A disgusting market. She hates all of this, and if it weren't for Johnny, she would still have to live this life. No need to thank me. I had a crush on you, and from that moment on, it was already decided that you would become my woman. You drink some tequila? I couldn't leave my wife in that deplorable place. Jerk! Judy turns her face away in annoyance. Can't you be a little more honest with yourself? Jinsei asked in a gentle voice. n/o/vel/b/jan.c//om. Judy threw Jinsei the middle finger. Now that I remember, my sister... He clenches his fist angrily. Even though that man seems like a nice guy, I need to see him in person. I won't give my sister away easily. Then he suddenly realized something. Wait, did you say he became a vampire? So his appearance might have changed? Eddie said, exactly. This information is from before he became a vampire. His appearance may have changed according to his potential. Plebeian vampires are weak, and they are slaves. I feel sorry for that man. Johnny spoke in a disappointed voice. But he didn't look sorry. He drinks some tequila while out of the corner of his eye he looks at Jessica, who is sat beside him. Eddie, explain your plan to me, Madam asked curiously. Oh. Eddie looks at Madam and starts to explain what he was thinking of doing. Jessica climbs up on the bench and takes the document. She looks at the document, and soon her eyes light up a little. She seems to know the man. Johnny noticed this, but decided to remain silent. Where's Roberta? He asked Madam. Madam, who was talking to Eddie, just pointed up, indicating she was on the second floor. I'll go see her, he said. Then he left the bench and walked towards the second floor. I'll go with you, Jinsei said. Me too. Jessica got off the bench and followed Johnny. Judy didn't say anything. She just followed Johnny silently. Roberta, BAM. Johnny opened the door with a bang. Era. Roberta, who was sitting on a sofa, spoke, then looked at Johnny with a gentle smile. Why the hurry? Johnny looked at the woman. She was wearing a flowing ankle-length black dress and had abundant silky black hair that reached the floor, healthy white skin that seemed to glow in the dim lighting, and violet eyes that shimmered with a playful light. But what stood out most about her were her enormous breasts that were bigger than Johnny's head. They were the famous J-cup. Seeing Johnny staring at her breasts, she flashed a seductive smile. How was your job? Are you really 40 years old? Johnny asked as he stared at her breasts. The question was very reasonable. Even though she was an older woman, her breasts didn't seem to be sagging down. He eventually replied, Yeah, the job was easy. He approaches her and sits beside her, then extends his arms and places them on the woman's shoulder. Yes, I am, she replied. Slap. She slaps Johnny's hand that was almost touching her breast. She turns to face Johnny and speaks with a gentle smile. Not in public. Johnny was speechless, but he accepted her will. He doesn't like to force his women. Tisk, Jude was annoyed. Are those things growing? I do not know. I stopped caring about it. I'm surprised you don't have back pain, Judy said. The key is posture. She laughed. Tell me about it later. My back hurts a little, Jinsei said. Okay. Johnny, we need to talk, Jessica said. What is it? Johnny looked at Jessica. Jinsei, Roberta, and Judy are silent and wait for Jessica to speak. My brothers are in town, and they're working with the man who hired you. Oh. Johnny puts his hand to his chin. What does Clan Horseman want with Lucy? Jinsei narrowed her eyes a little. She hated vampires. At first, it was difficult for Jinsei to get along with Jessica, who was a noble vampire, but she learned to accept her as time passed, especially since Johnny didn't like how the two women were constantly fighting. But other vampires? She hates them. I don't know. I'm just the third heiress. So father and my brothers don't tell me much. She didn't lie. Her brothers didn't tell her anything. She was the one who discovered their plans through conversations and documents. They didn't tell her anything, but they didn't stop her from figuring things out either. Johnny wasn't very interested in this. He just worked for Lucy because the vampire sends large amounts of money for small services. The job he did today was just to retrieve a relic from the hunters and throw it into the sea. Easy job, and he was paid very well for it. Jessica continued. But one thing I'm sure of, they came to hunt a man named Adam William Lycos. Johnny narrowed his eyes. What do they want with that old man? Do you know him? He is my father. Jinsei, Jessica, Roberta, and Judy looked at Johnny in curiosity. Johnny never talked about his family to the women, and they never asked about it. What do your brothers want from my father? They want the blood of an alpha wolf. Huh, let them try. My dad isn't weak. Johnny snorted. But are his children? Johnny's atmosphere changed, and he was becoming more aggressive, and his eyes started to glow bright blue. Then he looked at Jessica fiercely. Jessica just looked at Johnny indifferently. She obviously wasn't affected by Johnny's pressure. After all, she wasn't weak like the three women in the room. But inside, she was sad to see Johnny's reaction. As expected, vampires and wolves can't be together. That was a question she had always had since she started a relationship with Johnny. Although Johnny doesn't care about the wolves and vampires dispute, it was hard for Jessica not to think that way, mainly because he treated other women very differently from how he treats her. Johnny might not realize it, but something inside him didn't like mixing with a vampire, and unconsciously, he treated her differently because of that. And Jessica is a new lover. Compared to the three women who have known Johnny for a long time, they've only known each other for 2 months, and since then, their relationship hasn't progressed much. Johnny, calm down. She's not guilty. You know that. Jinsei spoke in a calm tone. Gore, Johnny growled, but soon he swallowed his anger. The wolves were very protective of the pack members, and even though Johnny has been away for a long time, he never left his father's pack. Seeing Jessica's face, he thought inwardly, fuck. Don't think nonsense, and tell me what's going on. He was a man who didn't know how to apologize. The women just sighed. My brothers have come to see the ritual Lucy is preparing, but this is just an excuse. His main objective is to hunt the man named Adam William Lycos. They want alpha wolf blood to use. They probably want to keep that freak stable. Jessica said the last part in disgust. Freak? Johnny asked. Hybrid? Realizing what she said, Jessica's face darkened. By bad-mouthing hybrids. Did she just deny her relationship with Johnny? After all, if they ever had a child, their child would be born a hybrid. Anyway, I just came here to warn you not to get involved in this matter, but now that I know that man is your father, I find it hard for you not to get involved. Just don't die. She got up from the couch, walked towards the door, and quickly left. Johnny didn't stop her from going. All the women sigh at the same time. Johnny dash, Roberta was about to say something, but Johnny interrupted. I know, you don't have to tell me, Johnny sighed. He knew he wasn't good with feelings. She's a noble vampire, and it's difficult for her to change who she is. Plus, like all vampires, she hates hybrids. That's natural for her species. So she must feel disgusted just being around the hybrid who lives in her house, Jinsei explained. I know, older wolves are like that too, Johnny said. He didn't particularly care about that. Roberta's eyes glowed violet for a few seconds. You have to talk to her, or you'll lose her forever, she advised him. Another day, Johnny doesn't listen to her. Instead, he gets up and walks towards an empty spot, and then he takes out his phone, opens the contacts tab, and sees his father's number. Sighing, he clicks on the phone number, then hears, Johnny? Hey, old man dash. Seeing Johnny's decision, Roberta just shook her head, a little disappointed. He just does what he wants and never listens to anyone. That kind of attitude will bite his ass in the future. But that doesn't matter. As long as he's with me, he'll be fine, even if all his lovers die, she thought while showing a gentle smile. A week later. Scat hack. Why are you sitting? Victor asked curiously as he looked at Scathack, who was sitting on top of a pillar of ice. I'm meditating, and stupid disciple, call me master. Victor nodded, but he completely ignored the last sentence Scathack spoke. Instead, he looked around and saw several small craters that were starting to regenerate on their own. Magic is amazing, he thought. The training, beating, was going well. Victor fought Scathack for a week straight, and even now, he didn't feel tired. The only visible sign of tiredness on Victor's body was his sweat. Since he moved around a lot, naturally, he would be sweaty, but that was it. He progressed decently in swordplay and in the martial arts that Scathack was teaching him. Scathack didn't name the martial art he was learning. She just said it's a martial art that she created herself. However, he noticed several moves from famous martial arts like Muay Thai, Taekwondo, boxing, karate, etc. But while they were similar, they were very different. The martial art he was learning was created to extract 100% of the vampire race's potential. I think it should happen any time now. Scathack opened her eyes and looked at Victor. Victor didn't understand, but he soon felt his throat go dry and fell to the ground while holding his throat. Bloodlust, one of the vampire's most obvious weaknesses. Scathack jumped off the ice pillar as she fell to the ground. Bloodlust can drive the individual mad. He won't recognize who is ally or enemy. A perfect berserker state. Victor looks at Scathack. His appearance has changed, his eyes have turned blood red, and his teeth have sharpened. He didn't understand. His bloodlust seemed to be stronger than before. Maybe it's because I used too much power? He thought. Scathack started to twirl her spear. If you're a vampire who has gone through the ritual, when you've been bloodthirsty for a long time and can't control yourself, a ritual protection spell will be automatically activated. This spell forces the vampire into a coma state. Victor took the great sword and got up from the ground. N/O/vel/B//Jen.C//C//OM. The witches created the ritual at the request of the Vampire King to control the bloodlust of the vampires who were running rampant at the time. The ritual spell is simple. They alter the vampire's human bloodlust and focus that bloodlust on their lovers. Because of this, female and male vampires who have lost their lovers will eventually fall into a deep coma until they perform a ritual with another lover. The ritual made it easier for vampires to control their bloodlust, and because of this tool, we were able to live in society. Scathack stops spinning the spear and aims the sharp part of the spear at Victor's neck. She displays a seductive smile. The time period for the spell to be activated is 1 month. If you can't control yourself in a month, you'll become an empty corpse.